Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Dreamland Encounters. Here on this channel, I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. There's something about that stretch of Route 14 through southern Illinois that gets under your skin. It was early September, right when the sun drops below the tree line and the sky still glows while everything else fades to shadow. I was heading home late after visiting my aunt, hoping to make it back before midnight. The road was empty, nothing but cornfields, silos, and occasional rundown barns breaking up the landscape. My music played softly, windows cracked to let in the warm evening air. Crickets were starting their nightly chorus in the roadside ditches. Just past 7:30, something caught my eye. Lights off to the left, maybe half a mile into a field. At first, I thought it was farm equipment. Those big harvesters have lights everywhere, but these were different. They weren't moving, and they were high up. 5 or 6 pale yellow-white lights in a shallow arc, hanging completely still. No blinking, no sound. I slowed down, trying to get a better look, but the corn and hedges blocked my view. The road curved, and for a moment, the trees completely obscured the field. When I emerged on the other side, the lights had vanished, gone. Just like that. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting them to reappear. Once, I thought I saw a faint glimmer behind me, but it might have been just a glass reflection. The more I drove, the more that moment stuck with me. It didn't feel like something I could easily explain. Hours later, I stopped at a small gas station near Yucca. I'd been desperate to use the bathroom and grab a drink. One of those older stations that seemed frozen in time. The whole way there, those strange lights kept turning over in my mind, unexplained, unexpected, just hanging there in the September twilight. I pulled into this tiny gas station with barely any signs of life. Just 2 pumps out front and a small shop with lights flickering under old fluorescents. The place was empty when I arrived, except for a sleek black SUV parked off to the side. Its engine was off, windows sealed tight. It looked new and out of place in this rundown spot. After using the bathroom and grabbing a water and snack, I returned to find the SUV still sitting there, unchanged. I didn't pay much attention until I got in my car and cracked the window. Suddenly, a man materialized beside me. He hadn't made a sound. One moment I was alone, the next he was leaning against my car window frame, startling me completely. His appearance was precise. A perfectly tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, black tie, and dark sunglasses despite the night's deep darkness. His face was blank, neither threatening nor friendly. "You didn't see anything unusual on Route 14, right?" he asked. His voice was soft yet mechanical, almost like he was reading from a script. I just stared. "No," I answered. He continued watching me, hand resting on my window frame, seeming to look through me rather than at me. After a moment, he nodded once, released the car, and walked back toward his SUV, but he didn't enter. Instead, he stood beside the driver's side door, facing away. I pulled out faster than normal, my hands suddenly sweaty. Something about the encounter felt deeply wrong, though nothing specific seemed threatening. About a mile down the road, I checked my mirror. The SUV was trailing me precisely 2 car lengths back, a dark shape without headlights. For 15 miles, it matched my every move. Lane changes, speed adjustments, the SUV mirrored everything perfectly. Not aggressive, just persistently present. On a hunch, I turned onto a winding county road cutting through farmland. The SUV followed. Another random turn onto a narrow gravel lane. No streetlights, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles, surrounded by dark, empty fields. I glanced back again. I killed my lights and pulled over, engine still running, and waited. 3 minutes passed with no other cars in sight. Only the sound of insects rustling through the corn stalks broke the silence. When I finally pulled back onto the road, the SUV was nowhere to be seen. The next morning, something strange caught my eye. Fingerprints marked my car's driver's side window, not just smudges where someone might have leaned in, but also higher up on the window frame, as if someone had gripped it from above. A thin, straight mark ran from the roof's edge down to the door handle. It wasn't a scratch, but a residue, slightly oily and faintly iridescent in the sunlight. No matter how I tried wiping it with a towel, the streak remained, seeming to sink into the paint. Even the car wash couldn't remove it. A few nights later, walking the dog before bed, I spotted a black sedan parked across the street. No occupants, no lights. It wasn't a neighbor's car. 5 minutes later, it had vanished, possibly unrelated, but unsettling. I've started avoiding Route 14, not because of the lights exactly. It's the question. The way he asked it, like he already knew the answer. We were behind Tyler's house, where the cornfield meets the thinning woods. Late October, in Iowa, around 9:45 at night. Warm, with enough leaves to rustle in the wind. Distant grain dryers hummed, and that distinct farm smell of burnt chaff and fertilizer hung in the air. 4 of us were there, me, Tyler, Jordan, and Miles. No drinking, just hanging out before Halloween weekend, walking paths we'd carved years ago through the rows. Tyler wanted drone footage for a horror short, using a cheap camera to capture the nighttime field. About 100 yards in, we saw the first light, a dim flashlight-like glow in the sky. Miles pointed it out. It blinked twice, paused, then blinked again. Not a plane, no sound. It didn't move like a drone either. Instead, it hung suspended, then slowly slid to the side before stopping again. Tyler took out his phone and started filming. We noticed other lights in the distance, 2 more, lower down. They moved in a pattern, pulling together and then separating. Jordan made a joke about Morse code signaling us to go away, but no one laughed. A strange feeling settled in my gut. It wasn't exactly fear, more like we were somewhere we shouldn't be. The lights felt like they were watching us, not the other way around. We kept observing. Tyler launched his drone to get a better view, flying it over the crop stalks and tilting toward the lights. He hit record, and we all crouched down to stay out of the shot. When the drone reached about 30 feet high, the lights shifted. They didn't fade or blink. They moved rapidly in perfect synchronization, sliding sideways instead of up or down. The entire sky above the field shimmered like heat waves rising off hot asphalt. Suddenly, the lights zipped into that shimmer and vanished. The drone feed immediately cut out, going black. Tyler manually brought it down. The landing was smooth, with no visible damage. Oddly, the battery read full, and the camera wasn't functioning. We hiked back to the house quickly, barely speaking. Each of us seemed to hope someone would explain it away as a prank or illusion, but no one did. Tyler connected the drone to his laptop. The footage showed only static where the lights had been, with the rest of the video appearing normal. When he checked his phone video, things got stranger. He discovered he'd recorded over a minute of the lights before even launching the drone. But when he opened the gallery, the file had completely disappeared. No thumbnail, no corrupted version, nothing in the cloud backup. He was certain he hadn't deleted it. Jordan investigated his phone too. His side footage met the same fate. The video app froze when he tried to open it, then rebooted with the clip missing entirely. I hadn't recorded anything, but I checked my phone anyway. A new, unfamiliar notification appeared. A permissions alert showing remote access completed at 9:58. I hadn't downloaded anything that day. We left soon after. The street was eerily quiet. Driving home with the radio low, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, knowing how irrational I was being. Nothing happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling we'd been marked somehow. The next morning at school, everything seemed normal, but something had fundamentally changed. Something felt off. The guy seemed on edge. Tyler looked exhausted and kept checking his phone like it might vanish. Miles mentioned strange clicking sounds coming through his phone speaker overnight. At first, it seemed random. Jordan's Wi-Fi inexplicably disconnected at 3 a.m., though no one else in his house experienced issues. Then, after fourth period, I spotted him, a man in a crisp black suit standing by the senior lot's chain-link fence. He wasn't interacting with anyone, just pacing slowly and methodically. Clean-shaven, white shirt, black tie, sunglasses. He looked more like an observer than a visitor. A teacher came outside, paused when she saw him, started walking toward him. Without a word, he turned and disappeared around the gym's corner. When I told Tyler during lunch, he went silent. His mom had found something unsettling that morning, a single set of boot prints in their backyard, size 12 or 13, forming a straight line. No other tracks, no disturbed ground, just those precise footprints. We agreed to stop discussing it at school. The videos were gone. The drone footage was useless. We had nothing concrete. But strange occurrences continued. Jordan's email locked him out, supposedly accessed from Virginia. Miles's car alarm triggered at exactly 2:17 a.m. for 3 consecutive nights. Tyler stopped bringing his laptop, claiming it wouldn't charge. One afternoon, I returned home to find my bedroom window open, which I knew had been locked that morning. Nothing was missing, nothing moved. Yet my phone sat on the windowsill, not where I'd left it. About a week later, I saw him again, walking to my car after practice around 5:30, With the sun already down, I cut across the grass near the side lot. There he was, standing under the bleachers, half hidden in shadow, motionless. No phone, no expression, just standing, hands clasped, waiting. I didn't stop, didn't even look. I got in my car and drove away. Tyler moved to Missouri 2 months after our strange encounter. His mum claimed it was for her job, but I doubt that was the whole truth. He disappeared from our group chat without a proper goodbye. The drone still sits in a shoebox under Miles's bed, untouched since that night. It was a sticky August evening when I launched the drone from my backyard just after sunset. My home sits on the edge of a small valley in western Oregon, surrounded by forest and a few weathered radio towers on the ridge above. A friend had told me about Hilltop 6, the perfect spot for long-range videography with a clear 360-degree view, free from power lines and cell towers. Around 7:15 p.m., I packed the drone into its case and drove up the narrow gravel road to an old logging trail. I set up on a flat dirt patch about 200 yards below the towers. The area was completely deserted. No street lights, just the buzz of cicadas and distant highway traffic. I ran through my pre-flight checklist: props locked, battery full, GPS locked. The drone lifted into the air, hovering at 150 feet. My tablet's live feed showed crisp golden light fading to blue, Douglas firs outlined sharply against the sky. After some steady pan shots, I decided to climb higher to 300 feet and tilt the camera down toward the road. When I tapped the joystick, the feed stuttered for a moment. Suddenly, it locked up completely, a grey pixelated mess of digital snow. I hit the emergency hover button. The drone beeped, but the screen remained static. Tablet in hand, I sprinted up the trail, watching the signal strength meter blink red. At the ridge base, I paused, pointing the tablet toward the drone's last known location. The static persisted until the live image finally returned. The first thing I saw was the ground dropping away. At the frame's edge, something dark and slick streaked beneath the drone. Rewinding the slow-motion feed revealed a long, slender shape, smooth as oil, slicing past the lens at nearly 100 miles an hour. No wings, no rotors, just a dark blur like a shark cutting through water. I launched the drone, keeping my eyes glued to the video feed. Something strange flickered across the screen, a dark streak that seemed to defy physics. No shadow, no downdraft, just pure, impossible motion. My heart raced. In all my hundreds of flights, I'd never seen anything like this. The wind was light, and no massive birds were around to explain the anomaly. I set the drone to return home, watching it trace its GPS route back. As it touched down and locked its motors, I realized I'd forgotten to disengage the geofence before packing up. Just then, my phone buzzed. A blocked number with no caller ID popped up. I figured it was a telemarketing glitch or wrong number. In the car, I played the voicemail. Quiet breathing, then a smooth, low male voice. "We need you to stop flying near Hilltop 6. You've seen enough." A click, static, then silence. I sat under a busted streetlight, staring at my phone. No trace of the call existed, no message on my service provider, no entry in the call log. The voicemail interface showed it as new, but pressing buttons only returned an error. Driving home, the empty road stretched before me. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting something to appear. Nothing did. At home, I downloaded the drone footage. The clip showed the ridge, sunset glow, and those few glitched frames with a dark streak smeared like ink across the video. Sleep eluded me. That voicemail kept playing in my mind. The flat command about Hilltop 6, spoken as if I'd already agreed to comply. At 2 a.m., I got water and noticed my phone glowing. No notifications, but the voicemail icon blinked. When I tapped it, the screen just spun and stopped. Morning came, and I dove into researching Hilltop 6's airspace. FAA charts showed only Class G airspace, completely uncontrolled. No military zones, no restricted altitudes. Something wasn't adding up. I pulled off the dirt road onto the gravel lot beside Mirror Lake just after 10 that Friday night. The moon was almost full, bright enough to light the pines, but dim against the low fog rolling in off the water. I checked online forums for any other drone pilot's experiences, finding nothing about strange objects or mysterious warnings. Determined to capture a clean shot of the ridge, I returned that night at 7 p.m., parking at my usual spot and setting up the drone. I climbed the trail and adjusted the camera to face west toward the sunset, leveling it out straight. As I ran the drone up to 200 feet, then 250, the feed remained stable with no glitches or lag. I hovered for a minute, watching the hillside lighten in the last rays. Suddenly, at exactly 7:23, the feed flickered to grey static. Reflexively, I throttled up and caught a glimpse of the same dark blur beneath the drone, moving even faster this time, just 2 frames of shape before the feed cut out completely. My controller buzzed with a signal loss alert. I hit return to home and scanned the sky, seeing nothing but an empty slope of pine trees tinted orange by the sunset. No blinking lights, no contrails. When the drone landed, I removed my goggles and stared at the ridge, half expecting someone to emerge from the trees. Nothing moved. No footprints disturbed the dirt around my launch pad. I packed up quickly, my heart racing. During the drive home, my phone rang twice from a private number. I didn't answer. Later, I played the voicemail. "We told you to stop. This is your final warning." The same calm, distant voice sent chills down my spine. In a panic, I deleted everything. Phone files, gone. Drone controller, unplugged. Laptop video, erased. I even tore up the FAA map I'd used. The next morning, I sold the drone and controller on Craigslist for half price, claiming it was faulty. I shipped it to a random PO box in Nevada, telling the buyer to deal with the video issues. Sometimes I still think about Hilltop 6, that silent shape zipping through my live feed and the mysterious men in black who never appeared in any call logs. I don't go back there. I don't fly drones anymore, and late at night I could swear I hear a soft hum in the breeze like a distant rotor, except there's nothing but stars. I'm an amateur videographer, and I drove 2 hours from Salt Creek to witness some unusual light displays. The forecast had mentioned anomalous atmospheric glows that people had been reporting. With my DSLR on a tripod and smartphone as backup, I set up about 20 feet from the shore, focusing the camera on the water. The lake was unnaturally still, like a sheet of liquid metal stretched over the rocky landscape. Sitting on a cooler with my coffee thermos, I waited in silence. Wind whispered through cedar trees, and occasional duck splashes broke the stillness. At 10:17, a faint shimmer appeared on the far side of the lake, just above the tree line. What started as a thin, almost electric pale blue line soon curved upward in a short semicircle before vanishing behind the trees. I switched my phone to video mode, panning left to right while keeping the DSLR recording steadily at 30 FPS. Over the next 5 minutes, lights began emerging along the ridge. They were pale white, sometimes tinged with green or amber, always moving silently. Their patterns were unpredictable. Loops, zigzags, and spirals reminiscent of a child playfully manipulating a laser pointer. 2 lights at one point performed a synchronized dance, crossing paths and then reversing direction. A surge of excitement rushed through me. I set down the phone and focused on the DSLR, tracking a bright orb gliding smoothly above the pine trees. These weren't standard aircraft lights, no strobing or blinking, just fluid motion like an invisible hand drawing with light. Around 10 minutes later, the lights gradually faded. The lake returned to its obsidian-like surface. I stopped recording and quickly reviewed the phone clip, seeing only tree shapes and wavering orbs. Satisfied, I packed away the phone, but left the DSLR recording a bit longer to capture water reflections. When I finally shut off the camera around 10:35, I walked to the cooler and picked up my phone. Suddenly, the hair on my arm stood up. In the preview window, I caught a flicker of movement behind me, a dark shape stepping 2 feet to my right, casting a slight shadow on the cooler. Initially, I dismissed it as a swaying branch, but when I expanded the screen, I froze. A dark figure in a suit stood just beyond the camera's soft focus facing the lake. I hadn't heard a thing. No footsteps, no movement behind me. Carefully, I scrubbed through the video clip frame by frame. The man appeared for a mere 17 frames, less than a second before vanishing completely. His posture was rigid, as if he'd walked up, turned toward me, and then stepped back out of sight. When I enlarged the image, his face remained a blurry, dark oval beneath what seemed to be a fedora. No glint of glasses or metal, no distinguishable features. A chill ran down my spine. I glanced over my shoulder into the moonlit landscape. Only pines and fog surrounded me. My cooler swayed gently in the breeze. Leaning closer, I sniffed the air and heard nothing but wind and water. I tried to rationalize the moment. Maybe a park ranger or a late-night walker. But something about the suit and his sudden appearance didn't sit right with me. The drive home was silent, empty roads reflecting my headlights through the misty night. Back in my apartment, I transferred the DSLR footage to my computer. The lights were clear and steady, but no figure appeared. Just my camera swinging to capture the final shimmer, then settling on the tripod as I packed up. Only one lens had caught him, With no secondary angle to verify the clip, I considered returning to confront whoever it was, but each time I imagined crossing that dark lot, I saw him emerging from the pines, watching me. So I stayed away. Tuesday arrived. Working as a systems analyst at a small IT firm, I was surprised when the receptionist announced a visitor. Walking to the lobby, I saw him, same black suit, same dark fedora, hands perfectly still at his sides, no badge, no identification, no belongings. Just standing, staring through the glass door. When I entered, he looked up. His eyes were shadowed, but an unsettling calm radiated from him, like a predator assessing its prey. "Mr. Ellis?" he asked. I nodded. He pressed a finger to his lips, then opened a leather-bound folder on the counter. A single typed page revealed its contents. Observations. Subject light phenomena at Mirror Lake. A black sedan blocked the Weatherford Trail, its engine ticking hot. I'd started hiking before sunrise, aiming to reach Shelter Rock by noon. The car sat sideways across the single track. No plates, no decals, just a sleek unmarked vehicle with closed doors and dark windows. I stopped about 20 feet away, swallowed some water, and tried to make sense of it. No footprints beyond mine, no keys on the hood, nothing obvious pointing to its owner. Heat whispered off the metal like breath. The engine was still warm. Caught between checking inside and continuing my hike, I suddenly needed to pee. My focus shifted violently. What if someone was hurt or trapped inside? I edged closer, uncertain. Later, at my desk, a strange encounter replayed in my mind. A man had approached me earlier, his demeanor clinical and intense. "I'm an interested party in reflections," he'd said, extending a folder toward me like a plate. No expression. I'd glanced around. The receptionist pretended to file papers. Someone in the waiting area stared at her phone. No one paid attention. "Transfer the files to me," he'd insisted. "We'll discuss terms." I'd shaken my head. "I can't." He'd stared at me for what felt like a minute, then slipped the folder back inside his jacket. "Reflections can be dangerous," he'd said softly, a statement that hit me like a slap. Now my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Don't share those videos. I haven't shared them. The footage sits on a hidden drive. I haven't returned to Mirror Lake, but sometimes, late at night, when the power flickers, I swear I see shapes moving in the glass. Faint glimmers behind my window like pale lights repeating the patterns I filmed. Once, on the security cam outside my apartment, I thought I saw someone in a dark suit standing under the street lamp, backlit by fog, before the frame went static. I moved closer to the vehicle, my boots sinking into the soft earth. I peered through the passenger window. Nothing inside, no purse, backpack, or phone. The glove box remained closed. The center console latched. I knocked softly on the glass, then harder. Silence. When I tried the door handle, it clicked, but wouldn't budge, as if locked. Crouching down, I shined my flashlight into the back seat. A single military green nylon duffel bag sat zipped shut, looking like it had been placed there moments ago. No signs of blood or struggle, just the bag. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to walk away and pretend I hadn't seen anything, but something felt off. I set down my pack and reached for my phone to call the ranger station at Cold Spring Camp. No reception. I tried again. Nothing. I snapped photos of the license plate area, just blank metal, and circled to the driver's side. Same situation. Locked, empty, but the engine was still warm. Sunlight was growing stronger, breaking over the ridge. Unzipping the duffel bag, I found 3 rolled black shirts, a pair of dark socks, and a thin envelope stamped "Not for public release." The envelope was sealed with no name or date visible. I quickly returned it to the bag, zipped it shut, and placed the bag on the car's roof. The bag was heavy and awkward. I hesitated about carrying down, unsure what might be in that mysterious envelope. The risk felt too great. I tucked my phone into airplane mode and decided to hike to the next junction, about 3 miles away, where I might get a signal. During the hike, an unsettling feeling crept over me. Eyes seemed to be watching, though no one was visible. I stopped twice, spinning in circles. Only trees, rocks, and shifting shadows surrounded me. At the junction's granite outcrop, where hikers traditionally carve their names, I paused and tried my phone. 1 bar appeared. I dialed park headquarters. 2 rings, then voicemail. Ranger Salazar's voice instructed urgent callers to press 1. I did. After another set of rings and some static, I reported finding the car, noted its warm engine, and mentioned the sealed "Not for public release" envelope. "Please send someone," I said. Then I ended the call. I left the hiking trail feeling uneasy. A strange message on my phone had warned me to turn back, and when I returned to where I'd parked, the car was completely gone, no trace, just disturbed ground where it had been sitting. I picked up the light duffel bag and headed to Cold Spring Camp by late afternoon. The ranger station was an old A-frame cabin with 2 windows and a sliding door. A woman named Perkins sat behind a worn desk, sorting maps. I explained everything: the car's disappearance, the envelope, the cryptic warning message. She listened carefully, flipping through logbooks and frowning. "No one reported any interference today," she said, matter-of-factly. When I mentioned the envelope details, she noted they'd heard about trail camera glitches near the Ridgeweed electrical disruptions that sometimes affected radio, GPS, and cell signals. She seemed relatively unconcerned, promising to send someone to investigate in the morning. I handed over the duffel bag, which she locked in a storage locker. They offered me a simple camper cabin with just a cot and propane heater for the night. As dusk fell, I sat at the picnic tables watching the communication towers blink their red lights, drinking instant coffee and mulling over the day's strange events. Around 9 p.m., something broke my concentration, a rattling at the door. I opened it to find 2 men in crisp black suits standing just outside the porch light. They looked completely ordinary except for their unusually pristine clothing, with no identifying badges or markers connecting them to any official service. My mind kept circling back to the car, the shirts I'd seen, and that mysterious envelope label. Something wasn't meant for public release, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to see. I rolled into Pine Creek Station late that October night, the temperature cold enough to see my breath. My gas tank was hovering on empty, and I was done gambling with how far I could stretch those last few drops. It was 11:03 p.m., and the station's neon sign buzzed weakly through the river fog. Only the flickering neon and a single overhead lamp broke the darkness. When 2 men approached, their stance was deliberate. The taller one spoke first, his voice polite but detached. "Evening." They wanted to ask about reported interference. I pointed toward the station cabin and mentioned Ranger Perkins had just taken a duffel bag, mentioning something about GPS jamming. They seemed unsurprised, nodding as if this was old news. The tall one pressed further. "Noticed anything unusual? Lights? Sounds? Anything off the trail?" I recalled the warm car engine, the mysterious envelope, the phantom phone message. I explained the car was gone when I returned, but its engine remained warm. The shorter man raised his hand, palm out. "Thank you, that will be all." No warmth, no further questions. They turned and walked down the path toward the station, disappearing into darkness without flashlights. No hesitation, no backward glance. Crickets and pine needles drifted in the breeze as I watched them vanish. That night, I locked the cabin door and pulled the covers tight. By morning, the duffel bag had vanished from the locker. Ranger Perkins denied ever seeing it. The logbook showed no interference report. The trail crew found no trace of the car. My phone's GPS logs were blank. I checked myself. I hiked out early, bypassing Shelter Rock and taking the main road back to town. At home, I installed a new backpack lock and trashed the envelope photo. Sometimes I drive past that logging road, scanning Tower Ridge. No traffic, no parked cars, no mysterious men. Just quiet forest and the distant town hum. But occasionally, my phone buzzes with an unknown number's message, and I never open it. I was filling up my hatchback when I first noticed the sedan. Parked silently about 20 feet away, it had black-tinted windows and immaculate paint. A man in a crisp white shirt and narrow tie sat motionless in the driver's seat, his posture rigid, staring straight ahead. I called out softly, but he didn't react. Glancing to the other side of the lot, I saw another identical sedan, this one with its engine running quietly. Another man sat inside, wearing the same suit, sunglasses obscuring his face. Both cars' headlights were off, but their tail lights glowed a faint red, as if recently turned down. After the pump clicked off at $20, I returned the nozzle, locked up, and went inside the station. Derek, the young clerk who always worked late, was stocking shelves. When I asked if anyone else had come in, he said no. I mentioned the cars outside, and he casually suggested they might be hunters parking overnight. Back in the lot, I sipped my soda and surveyed the scene. The sedans remained exactly where they'd been. I wanted to take a photo, but my phone was nearly dead, so I got in my car, locked the doors, and watched the interior light fade. As I pulled onto the cracked pavement, something shifted. Both cars came to life simultaneously. Their tail lights brightened, engines crackling. They followed me, maintaining a consistent 30-foot distance, mimicking my every move with an unsettling precision. My headlights cut through the fog as I drove north on Route 89, my car humming beneath me. Another sedan turned south onto the road leading to the river crossing. I blinked hard, slowing down. Coincidence, I told myself. Just timing and fog, and two drivers leaving at once. But when I looked again, both cars had vanished. The road ahead, empty. The gravel lot behind, empty. No skid marks, no fading headlights. Just black pavement reflecting my own tail lights. I exhaled hard enough to nearly blow the fog off my rear window and turned on the defroster. Gripping the wheel, I drove cautiously, keeping my speed under 30 and scanning every curve for any sign of those sedans. Nothing appeared. For the next 15 miles, not a single vehicle crossed my path. No trucks, no distant headlight glimmers. The radio dial brought only static, with an old country station sputtering in and out, playing unfamiliar tunes. I rolled down the windows. Silence pressed in, broken only by the engine's steady hum and wind tugging at the fog's edges. Goldridge Road Junction passed by, and though I considered stopping to check my mirrors, the thought of stepping into that black mist kept me moving. Home, warmth, daylight. At mile marker 13, the fog lifted. Streetlights emerged. A cluster of homes with glowing windows came into view. Exactly at 12:07 a.m., I pulled into my driveway. No cars, no footprints in the gravel. I leaned back, hands on the wheel, trying to steady my breathing. The next day at work, a receipt in my purse caught my eye. Pine Creek Station, dated 11:09 p.m., 9 minutes later than I remembered. I asked a co-worker if I sometimes lingered in my car. He laughed. No, you're punctual. Receipts print in real time. But I remembered pumping gas at 11:03, paying before 11:05. The receipt showed pump 2, the one nearest that first sedan with its engine off. What was I doing there at 11:09? That weekend, I returned in daylight. Warm sun, clear sky. The station looked different. Rusty pumps. No neon sign. Someone had removed the old structures, leaving only faint traces of what once was. I drove past the old Pine Creek Station, a skeletal structure of concrete and shattered windows. The lot was barren, no trace of sedans ever parking there. No security cameras, no barrier arms, just empty gravel and resilient grass pushing through cracks. I'd filled my tank at a nearby chain station, paid exactly $20, maintaining the quiet rhythm of everyday life. But that location always triggers a fleeting wonder. Who was behind those dark windows that night, and where did they go when I left? Just before midnight, I stepped onto my back deck. The early May air was cool, and the sky blazed with stars, a crystal-clear canvas. After hours inside with a book, a glance out the window caught the moon full and massive over the maple. Instinctively, I grabbed my phone and rushed outside. Setting it on the rail, I switched to night mode and aimed at the glowing orb. My hands were steady. I'd photographed the moon countless times, always capturing the same pale craters and soft luminescence. Midway through focusing, something unexpected darted across the lunar surface. Not a bird or cloud, but a dark shape moving in a perfectly straight line, silent and smooth, bisecting the moon's disk in less than a heartbeat. I captured the image and quickly reviewed it. The screen showed a pristine moon with a black slash across its top third, like a marker line. Zooming in revealed subtle depth and a gentle curve, more like an out-of-place shadow than a definitive edge. Switching to my borrowed Canon DSLR, I mounted the tripod and shot 3 more frames. Each image displayed the moon's perfection, interrupted by the same strange line, slightly shifting each time. A thrill ran through me. Perhaps a bat or bug had crossed the lens, but the line was too precise, too deliberate. I stepped back, scanning the sky through binoculars. The moon appeared unblemished, bright and silent. No planes, no birds, just me and maple branches swaying gently. The next morning, during my coffee break, I transferred the images to my laptop. There it was again, that dark curve slicing through the lunar surface in every frame. I stared, mesmerized by the pixels, pondering the unexplained. I bumped up the exposure, and the curve took on a faint metallic sheen while the rest of the shot remained unchanged. There were no other anomalies in the sky. At lunch, I showed Mark the photo. He suggested it looked like a volcanic shadow, a plume drifting in front of the moon, but no eruptions had happened in weeks. We joked about a lunar eclipse gone wrong. Mark laughed, but his brow furrowed. That evening, I printed the photo on glossy paper and clipped it to the fridge with a snail-shaped magnet, my only decoration. Before bed, I stared at the black arc glaring across the bright moon. The house fell silent, and I drifted off around 11:15. Morning brought an unexpected surprise. A plain white envelope on the kitchen counter, no return address or stamp. Inside was my identical photo, but someone had torn out the curved section across the moon, leaving a jagged semicircle. The missing chunk matched the black curve I'd seen perfectly. My heart raced as I flipped the photo over. No notes, just blank matte paper. Holding it to the light, I could see my floral countertop through the hole. The torn edge felt fresh and fibrous, as if cut just an hour ago. I scanned the kitchen front door, locked, windows closed. I'd come straight home from work yesterday with no stops or deliveries. The envelope must have appeared after midnight or before I woke up. My phone buzzed on the table. No new messages, just routine notifications, an afternoon shower alert and a minor train delay headline. Nothing about lunar shadows or stolen photos. Then I noticed the fridge. The original print was gone, with only the snail magnet marking its empty spot. I jumped and checked behind the fridge. Nothing. No paper scraps, no photo fragments, just a smooth metal surface. I carefully wrapped the torn photo in an envelope and tucked it into my bag. At work, time crawled. My screen seemed too bright, my chair too stiff. Each time I considered stepping outside, I imagined someone watching, waiting to slip away the real photo and leave that blank moon postcard. After dinner, I walked the dog, unsettled. I walked Scout early that morning, just as the sky began to turn lavender, with the sun still hidden behind low clouds. Living on the town's edge where sidewalks give way to pine forests, our morning routine often included a brief trek into the woods. The air was cool and damp, remnants of 2 days of rain lingering around us. Following the narrow path that wound between backyards and under tangled alder branches, I sipped the last of my travel mug coffee and watched Scout sniff at an old tree stump. Mist rose from the ground, creating a thin veil between the tree trunks. Suddenly, Scout went completely still, ears alert, tugging against his leash with unusual intensity. When I looked up, I saw it, a soft, pale yellow-white glow hovering about 30 feet above the ground. Oval-shaped and silent, it moved with an unnatural smoothness, sliding rather than flying toward a clearing in the pine trees. My heart raced as I reached for my phone, but the moment my hand moved, the light vanished. Later that night, I found myself walking the block, trying to clear my head. The moon hung full and unmarred overhead, casting no shadows. Street lights created halos through the thick humidity, illuminating quiet residential streets. Kids' bicycles sat in driveways, laundry flapped on clotheslines. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Back home, I checked my camera bag and found both memory cards intact. Connecting my DSLR to the laptop, I scrolled through the images. The arc appeared in every single shot. Trembling, I copied the raw files to a backup drive and closed the lid. As night deepened, a soft rustle near the window caught my attention. Peering out, I saw only leaves brushing against the glass. But then, in the corner of my eye, a dark shape slipped away from the fence. When I blinked, the yard stood empty, maple trees swaying gently. I went to bed, leaving a torn photo on the nightstand. Moonlight slanted through the blinds, highlighting the cutout like a keyhole. I stared until my eyes grew heavy. No more envelopes have arrived, and I haven't reprinted the photo. But the raw files remain hidden on that backup drive. And sometimes, when the moon rises in that exact position over the maple trees, I find myself half expecting to see that silent, wingless shadow flicker across the night, wondering who else might be watching. As I raised my flashlight, the light dipped behind the trees. The woods looked empty, just undergrowth and wet pine needles. Scout refused to move, staring intently at the spot where the light had vanished. I tried calling him, coaxing him forward, but he sat down hard, dragging the leash until I stopped. His wide eyes remained fixed on that patch of forest. When I knelt beside him, the path showed no signs of disturbance, no footprints or tracks in the mud. I switched my phone to camera mode and panned slowly. Nothing appeared. My hand trembled as I pressed the shutter once. The photo revealed only grey trees and moss, no unusual details. I unclipped Scout's harness, letting him off-leash to head back. He bounded ahead while I kept turning, half expecting to see some glow drift from behind the trees. Back in the yard, something felt off. My skin prickled like someone was watching from hidden corners. Throughout the day, I kept glancing at the living room window, anticipating a pale glow sliding past. That night, I set up old Wi-Fi security cameras around the front door. After testing their angles, I went to bed around 10:30 with Scout sleeping at my feet. The cameras were set to record motion-triggered clips. At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. Camera 1 had detected motion at 3:17 a.m. My heart sank when I opened the footage to find a black screen. I checked the other cameras, all blank. Reloading the app, I noticed one unoverwritten clip from camera 1. The 4-second video showed a grainy black and white front porch. The timestamp blinked in the corner. Twice, the doorbell rang. Slow and deliberate. The shot widened to reveal two figures standing together under the streetlight's dim glow. They wore dark suits, crisp white shirts, polished shoes. Their hair was neatly combed. No hats. It was closing time at Black Rock Cafe when the sun sank behind the ridge. Outside, the sky over the old quarry turned bruised purple, just like the stories people told about strange lights dancing against limestone walls. I'd heard those whispers all night long. My home security cameras captured something weeks earlier. Two men in black suits, standing motionless at my door at 3:17 a.m., their heads were tilted down, faces hidden, only their shoe shine and rigid shoulders visible. No badges, no briefcases. The clip was eerily still, like a frozen dollhouse scene, with just doorbell lights flickering. I rewound and watched repeatedly, hands trembling so badly I had to set my phone down. Scout, my dog, stirred on the bed behind me. I checked the hallway light. Dark. The front door loomed in the darkness. I didn't want to look. I texted a friend to come over, giving no explanation. He rang the doorbell twice, testing something, then left. Nothing happened. All day, a heavy feeling followed me. I felt watched. When I reviewed the morning's video feed, black screens covered everything except that single strange snippet. I downloaded it, emailed it to myself, then deleted and reinstalled the app. The blank cameras remained blank. Only that 4-second clip survived. That night, I unplugged all cameras. A cheap desk lamp replaced my usual red bulb. Scout slept beside me. I left the door unlocked, unable to bear listening for midnight bells. I woke at 2:45 a.m. to rain pattering on the porch roof and drifted back to sleep. At 3:17, I jolted awake. No doorbell, just rain. Scout breathed steadily beside me. In the morning, I studied those shadowy silhouettes again. Part of me wanted to erase the memory card, toss the cameras. Instead, I saved the file, transferred it to a USB key, and locked it in my desk drawer. I still walk Scout past the pine edge every morning, but I don't stop in the clearing. I don't lift my phone. I don't watch for lights. I tell myself it was just a glitch or a prank. Yet Scout's eyes still dart toward the tree line when we pass. And sometimes, late at night, I could swear I hear a doorbell echoing softly through the rain like a quiet promise. I was working a quiet shift at the cafe when a customer named John started talking about something strange. He described seeing orange spheres hovering silently over Miller's Pit the night before, massive orbs about 15 feet wide that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. When he tried to record them, the lights seemed to flicker away, almost intentionally avoiding documentation. As John sipped his espresso and stared out the window, a man in a crisp black suit entered. No tie, polished shoes, white shirt. He looked like someone official. The man paused at the doorway, scanning the nearly empty cafe before walking directly to John's table and sitting across from him. The fluorescent lights seemed to dim when the stranger arrived. John froze mid-drink, setting his cup down nervously. "Can I help you?" he asked. The man's response was direct and emotionless. "Tell me about the lights." Without introducing himself or showing any identification, the stranger interrogated John with machine-like precision. John described the exact location, naming back roads, gravel, cut-offs, and abandoned cabins. The man listened intently, not taking notes, just watching John with an unblinking stare. As John finished his story and prepared to leave, he glanced at me and gave a small, cryptic wave. Something about the interaction felt off, like the man knew exactly why he was there, and John knew exactly why he was being questioned. I watched, my heart racing, half expecting the suited stranger to somehow vanish into thin air, but he remained perfectly still, his presence heavy and unexplained. I drove down Route 47, windows down despite the chill, the quarry silent and dark. On my right, with just a distant street lamp's glow, the morning after John's encounter with the man in black felt surreal. Earlier at the cafe, John had stood up while the stranger spoke in an unsettlingly flat tone. "Be safe. John had hurried out without looking back, sending me a text. When I checked the booth, it was empty. The suit was gone. No one remained in the cafe except the lingering scent of cinnamon and espresso. I locked up, turned off the neon sign, and stepped outside under a bruised sky. The parking lot was deserted. No mysterious figure leaning against my car, just John's Prius wrapped in fog. At home, I switched on every light and checked my phone. No missed calls, no unknown messages. Only John's text sat there, making me wonder if he'd returned to be watched again. The laptop's fan clicked too mechanically, breaking the silence. I wanted to text him back, "You okay?" but hesitated, unsure what to say. Night brought restlessness. I watched steam curl from my tea at the kitchen table while soft headlights passed outside. A dark shape at the window startled me momentarily, just the neighbor's cat. I scrolled through local news. Municipal meetings, a high school band story, a missing cat. Nothing about suits or secret meetings. Sleep came fitfully. I checked the clock repeatedly, 10:03 a.m., then 1, then lying awake until 3:30. Every house creak sounded like gravel footsteps. Morning light felt weak and pale. I brewed coffee, adding too much cream to make it sweet, and stared at the empty street. Part of me wanted to call John, ask if he'd seen the man again or experienced strange lights, but I didn't. At 7:15, I left for my shift, following the same route past the quiet quarry. Headlights sliced through thick mist as pine trees stood sentinel on both sides. The morning began quietly at the cafe lot, where I parked and steeled myself before entering. The door chime announced my arrival. I set down my keys and forced a smile for the morning regulars clustered at the counter. No suits, no staring. The neon sign hummed back to life as I wiped the bar top, wondering about the man lurking somewhere in the fog, taking notes and waiting. Marisol sipped her cappuccino. "You okay?" "You look tired," she observed. I shrugged. "Long night." She nodded in understanding. My eyes drifted to the empty booth where John and the stranger had sat, and a familiar prickle crawled up my neck, that sensation of being watched. Through the window, only mist and streetlight cones greeted me. I turned back, tossing my cloth into the rag bin while the espresso machine hissed. Dropping a puck into the knockbox, I reached for beans to grind. The overhead lights felt oppressively bright, harsh against my nerves. I considered closing early but opted instead for mellow jazz playing softly in the background. Lunch passed without incident. No one mentioned the quarry lights or the man in the suit. It was as if last night had been erased, a collective agreement to remain silent. By evening, the encounter had blurred into distant memory. At 9:15, I locked up, set the alarm, and walked to my car. The sky was clear, stars steady and bright. Driving away, I caught my reflection. Dark eyes, pale face, an unresolved question hanging in the air. I didn't look back, just kept moving forward. Later that night, just after midnight, I was up on Eagle Ridge. My old Jeep sat parked beside the weathered plywood shack I'd built last summer. The cool air was just mild enough to forego a heavy coat as I hunched over my telescope. A clear sky stretched above, no moon, just a few planets and thousands of stars. My focus remained fixed on one unremarkable point in Cygnus, a star I'd been tracking for months. Amateur catalogs called it a blink star, because at high magnification it would mysteriously vanish for seconds before reappearing. The night started like any other observing session. I was tracking a peculiar star through my telescope, initially dismissing its odd behavior as a technical issue, but something felt different this time. With the eyepiece set to 250x, I focused until the star was razor sharp and began watching intently. The star blinked 3 times within the first minute, nothing out of the ordinary for me. Then, at 12:13 a.m., it suddenly vanished. 20 seconds later, it reappeared. I meticulously logged the interval, 20.4 seconds. Resetting the scope to 300x, I continued observing its intermittent blinking. After the third reappearance, the eyepiece went completely dark. I checked everything. Lens cap was off, I swapped eyepieces, but still nothing. My heart started racing. The finder scope showed a perfect sky, but the star's location was empty. I verified the mount's power cable and saw the control box's LED blinking slowly. Pressing the override button triggered a series of strange events. Computers flickered, the motor hummed, and the starfield returned, but without my mysterious star. Desperate, I attached my smartphone adapter and snapped a photo. When processed, the image showed only tiny stars against a black backdrop, the blinking star conspicuously absent. Around 12:17 a.m., a soft, orange glow appeared behind the valley's ridge. Initially mistaking it for headlights or a hiker's lantern, I realized it was stationary. The light hovered for 5 minutes before fading away. I recorded this in my notebook. Then I noticed something unsettling. My watch was 2 minutes slow. I always synced it before leaving, and my phone still read 12:19. Attempting to refresh the NTP server yielded no connection. Cell service was dead. I tried my ham radio calling Alpha Sierra November repeatedly. Only static answered. My fingers growing numb, I investigated my phone. Camera, weather app, compass, all frozen. The home button merely vibrated when pressed. After a forced reboot, the clock reset to 12:20 a.m. To my shock, all my earlier photos of the blinking star had vanished from the gallery. The gravel road was treacherous as I drove down, my headlights on low beam, unsure of each turn. My phone's GPS showed no signal, and offline maps revealed no clear path. I took the wrong fork twice before finally finding the main road by sheer luck. When I reached my driveway, the dashboard clock read 6:02 a.m., matching the sunrise. I sat breathing hard, the telescope's eyepiece shards in a paper bag on the passenger seat. My notebook lay open in the glove box with scribbled times, intervals, and a single note. Ridge light glow lasted 5 minutes. The night's events replayed in my mind. I'd been up on the ridge since 7 p.m., though time felt unreliable. The telescope mount had behaved strangely, humming when unpowered, snagging midway, then suddenly releasing and shattering its eyepiece. The sky had been eerily still. No ridge glow, no radio, no blinking star. Cygnus had vanished, replaced by pre-dawn haze. Inside my quiet house, my phone finally found service. 8 missed calls from my brother and 1 from an unknown number greeted me. When I called him back, he mentioned texting about dinner. Strangely, he claimed I'd answered his first call at 7 a.m., something I had no memory of. I checked my inbox. No texts from the unknown number, no voicemail. The photos I'd saved were still in my camera's memory card, shaky shots of a star and flickers of darkness. Oddly, every file was named imgl.jpg with identical timestamps. Exhausted, I dropped the broken eyepiece into my desk drawer, shut it, and rubbed my eyes. The clock read 6:35 a.m. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I pulled off the gravel road just before sunrise, engine ticking as it cooled. The morning fog blanketed my cornfield, so thick I couldn't see its far edge. With my thermos and flashlight in hand, I locked the truck and headed out to check the new irrigation lines I'd installed last week. Something caught my eye as I walked between the rows. The corn was missing. At first, I thought I'd misremembered the line placement, but as I got closer, the stalks ended in perfectly straight lines. Crouching down, I ran my hand over the cut stalks. No ragged edges, just smooth, even shears about waist-high. The flattened area formed a precise hexagon, each side exactly equal in length. I swept my flashlight over the ground. Every stalk leaned at the same angle, pressed into the soil as if someone had meticulously ironed it flat. No footprints, no tire tracks, nothing to show how anyone could have entered or left. I circled the pattern. The fog muted all sound. Even the birds were silent. Looking back toward the farmhouse, still too distant to make out details, I sat on a cut stalk to gather my thoughts. My boots pressed into the damp soil. Each step into the flattened patch left a clear heel imprint. But outside those 6 sides, the ground remained untouched. Not a single track crossed the perimeter. Walking back to the barn, I wondered if a weather balloon or a malfunctioning drone could explain this. Bess, my black lab, spotted me at the door and ran out to greet me. Later that day, I drove up to the observatory to download the mount's logs. Maybe they had recorded power surges or firmware errors, but the control box was gone, wrenched off its shelf with rough gouges in the plywood walls. The mount itself had vanished, with only jagged metal shavings on the floor, marking where it had been. I walked back through the woods in the afternoon light. The ridge was still and empty. No hunters, no lights, no signs of equipment, just trees and rocks. I still look up at the stars every night, but I don't return to Eagle Ridge. Occasionally, I catch a glimpse of a dim point that twitches, but I don't dwell on it. I tell friends I lost interest in Blink Star. I tell myself that makes sense. And sometimes in the darkest hour before dawn, I could swear I hear the soft hum of a mount's motors spinning into place, but there's nothing there except empty sky. The morning fog had lifted, and the sun burned off the last of the chill. I was out tightening a loose bolt on the pump, my mind still wrestling with the strange hexagon in my cornfield. In all my years of ploughing hundreds of acres, I'd never seen anything like it. I tried calling my neighbor Rick, but only reached his voicemail. A quick text with a photo from the field's edge showed the corn stalks bent low and gleaming in the sunlight. Something felt off. The photo seemed to lack a timestamp, which was odd. Maybe the cell tower was just slow out here. By noon, I loaded 3 ice-cold sodas into my pickup. The truck's AC was busted, so I drove with windows down, dust settling in the cab. My shirt was soaked with sweat by the time I reached the equipment shed. Grabbing a wrench, I headed to check the planter's drive belt. Machinery always felt more comfortable to me than those eerie corn stalk stumps. That's when I saw them. 2 men emerged from the tree line along the north field edge, walking exactly 12 feet apart with synchronized strides. Black suits, buttoned jackets, white shirts, and narrow black ties. No bags, no hats, no sunglasses. But their eyes were hidden in shadow. They moved with the precise, measured pace of airport security guards. I froze, wrench in hand. They didn't rush or call out. At the corner of the flattened patch, they stopped. The taller one studied the bent stalks, then looked at me without emotion. I set down the wrench, wiped my hands on my jeans. "Can I help you, fellas?" The shorter man tilted his head slightly. "Did anything change in the soil?" His voice was flat, like he was reading from a script. I pointed to the hexagon. "I've found this land 20 years. The soil compact sometimes, but this..." I gestured at the clean, geometric lines. "This isn't natural." The tall one nodded in agreement. No tracks, no debris. The precise flattening suggested external pressure applied evenly. He crouched, running a gloved finger across the ground. "Did you apply herbicide?" "No," I answered. "I'd have seen signs on the monitor. It would have killed the plants, not laid them like this." My dog had sensed something was off earlier, whining and heading back to the house. Now, standing with these strange men, I understood her unease. The phone rang, but I ignored it. Rick's call went unanswered as I stood with 2 men examining the field. "The new lines run south of the east field. This is north," I said. They nodded, seemingly confirming something in their notes. The shorter man asked about overnight seismic activity. I recalled the morning's calm. No sirens, no quakes, nothing unusual on the news. Checking the ground, I was certain. If something had shifted below, there would be cracked soil or visible upheaval. "Pipes wouldn't bend plants like that," I added. They exchanged as the tall one spoke firmly. "Stay off the area for 72 hours. Soil sample kits are en route." From his jacket, he pulled a plain white envelope with an unfamiliar code stamp. Inside, a single sheet listed test protocols and a date 3 days ahead. No letterhead, no signature, just bare instructions to await a technician. When I looked up and asked who they were, he simply called himself an appropriate liaison. Then, as quickly as they'd appeared, both men melted into the maple and oak trees bordering the field, leaving only birdsong behind. Sunlight now blazed overhead, turning cornstalks yellow around the field's edge. I pocketed the envelope, grabbed my wrench, and headed to the shed. Each few steps I glanced back. That evening, another discovery awaited. In my toolbox, an identical official folder appeared. Same plain white paper, same cryptic code. Under the shop's fluorescent light, I noticed no signs of adhesive or staples. Someone had placed it there, unnoticed. Driving home along the dusty lane, Best rode shotgun, with ears pulled back. At the mailbox, I paused, staring at the envelope. With a quick motion, I tossed it inside and slammed the lid. No witnesses. In my kitchen, instant coffee steamed as I flicked through television channels, nothing but reruns and weather reports. The local news mentioned only a road closure nearby. 90 meters away, night descended on the Dry Mesa radio observatory, and my shift was proceeding like any other. The sky stretched out overhead, crystal clear with the Milky Way visible, and the radio dishes pointed silently toward different sections of the heavens. It was just after 10 p.m. on a windless September evening. When the static first started, I didn't think much of it. My folding chair was positioned next to the control shack, a steaming coffee in hand as I scanned the telemetry readouts. These dishes typically tracked cosmic noise and sunspots, mostly producing background hiss. But at 10:17, something changed. The left-hand monitor sputtered into white noise, then went completely silent before snapping back with the faintest pulse, like a distant mic tap. I frowned and tapped the screen. No error messages appeared, and the other 3 dishes remained normal. I radioed dish 4. No response. The silence felt different that night. Deeper. Uncomfortable. I stood and crouched behind the shack, peering around the corner. The array of polished steel dishes sprawled across the plateau, each pointing to a different slice of sky. Nothing moved, no trucks, no lights, no wind. At 11:03 p.m., the radio erupted again. The soft tapping was now synchronized across all channels. I rushed to the controls and muted them, leaving only the generators hum. Then I saw it. A pale amber light, like a slow-burning ember, drifting just above the western horizon. This wasn't like a plane. It didn't zip, or flicker, or blink. Instead, it moved with an unnatural smoothness, hovering maybe 20 dege above the Mesa and heading south. Grabbing the binoculars, I realized the light was too small to determine its shape. It glowed gently, without headlight intensity or strobes, just a single orb moving at what seemed like a walking pace. Except impossibly high up. I switched to a telephoto lens, mounting it on the tripod and framing the horizon between two dishes. The light held steady for a moment, then disappeared below the Mesa's rim. I tracked the spot where the light vanished, hearing the generator's fuel-laden cough. When it reappeared, the light was gone. Checking the logging software revealed a 6-second power draw dip. The dish motor readouts flickered, then stabilized. No external interference showed up, no grid spikes, no radar returns on the base scanners. Pulling on a jacket, I walked to the fence and stared down the slope into the scrub. The horizon remained empty, just the usual pines and ranch road cutting through. I spent the next hour pacing between dishes, listening for any rotor wash or engine hum. With no phone signal out here, no cell, no internet. I couldn't check aircraft notices. A radio call to the on-duty astronomer on the Hilltop station returned only static. Back in the shack, I scribbled anomaly at 11:03 in the log and returned to watching for cosmic rays. The morning arrived grey and cool. By 6:30, the maintenance crew's truck engines rolled up the hill. At the gate, 2 men in black suits stood by the guardhouse. No badges, no hats, their shirts crisp and starched. They didn't acknowledge me as I swiped my ID badge. "Morning, Dan," I said to Clyde. They turned simultaneously. The taller one stated Marcus Hall, without smiling. He handed me a manila folder. "Review this." The other man stood back, hands clasped, tie perfectly straight, shoes unscuffed. Their low conversation carried fragments. Shift log, omit, discuss offline. Inside the folder, a printout of my entry showed 113 anomaly, marked classified. Typed below, "Do not discuss incident with anyone. Authority level black side access required." The shorter man stated flatly, "That was last night's anomaly. You saw nothing." His pause hung heavy. "Do you understand?" I swallowed. But I saw the light. It moved. It passed behind the Mesa. The taller man stepped forward, his expression politely cold. No such movement registered on our sensor arrays. No power fluctuation. No radio interference. You reported a spurious signal. That's all. I stood there, the gate's metal latch swinging in the morning breeze, a heavy folder in my hand. The men had just walked away, their footsteps crunching in unison until the scrub pines swallowed them. No car, just a deliberate walk down the hill after a terse conversation. "You're cleared for standard duty, but you will not log or speak of the incident again," he had said, his voice neutral and final. My words had caught in my throat. Back in the control shack, I tore out the log page with the anomaly entry and tossed it in the burn barrel behind the generator shed. Smoke curled toward the radio dishes. The sky overhead was pale blue, a falcon wheeling above the array, eyes sharp for field lights. At lunch I scanned the shift logs. Nothing. No entry for 11:03, no note of power dip, no mention of radio glitch. It was like I'd never written anything. My hands shook as I sipped coffee from the break room pot, staring out the window and waiting for that amber light to drift back into view. The dish motors hummed through calibrations that afternoon. The astronomer called for clear data. I punched the keys, sensors checked out. No anomalies. I watched the sunset through the east window, orange and red, behind the antenna. On my way home, I stopped at the junction above the Mesa. Its rim cut a clean line against the sky. I sat in the car, headlights off, radio silent. Nothing moved, just the scent of pinyon and juniper, and a feeling of being watched. When I reached my trailer, I opened a fresh notebook. September 12th, 11:03 p.m., I wrote, "Observed slow-moving amber light dip below Mesa. Power generator hiccup. Sensor panel reset. Radio silence. No radar returns. Folder labeled classified. Instructed to omit." I read it twice, closed the book, and locked it in the drawer. Outside, the night settled without a sound. In bed, I listened to the trailer's metal roof creak under a high wind. When I closed my eyes, I saw that light again, a steady glow descending over bare rock, disappearing like a lamp lowered behind a curtain. Two men in black suits, faces unreadable, telling me what I could and couldn't see. The late afternoon sun still blazed over southern Oregon as I lifted off from Pine Valley Airstrip. Just another routine flight for an amateur pilot like me, with a rented Cessna 172 and a simple plan to photograph the Rogue River Canyon landscape. Climbing to 3,500 feet, I heard radio chatter about a small brush fire near Dry Creek Road. The smoke crews had it under control, but a visible plume caught my attention. I decided to swing by and take a look. The canyon corridor was clear, so I banked east toward the distant haze. By 5:25, I was hovering above the fire. The ground below was a stark canvas of red-orange flames and blackened earth. Heat rose against the plane's belly, causing a subtle shudder similar to driving over rough terrain at high speed. As I adjusted my camera for a closer shot, something unusual caught my eye above the smoke. 6 glowing orbs hung silently about 100 feet above the tree line. At first glance, they appeared pale and white, but zooming in revealed a soft amber core surrounded by a thin halo. Arranged in a loose V shape, each orb was spaced roughly 30 feet apart, moving in unison with the breeze. No prop wash, no strobe flicker, just a gentle drift. The world around me seemed to change. Radio chatter faded into the background, and the engine noise became muted. I cracked the window, straining to listen. Only the propeller's hum and rushing wind broke the silence. Something made me hesitate to report these strange objects, though I considered calling flight service about possible drones or fire district experiments. For 2 minutes, I watched the orbs hover. Then they slowly drifted apart, dispersing into the woods on either side. I managed to snap a few photographs before banking north to escape the thermal updraft. By 5:40, I was clear of the smoke and heading back to Pine Valley. My camera's memory card was now filled with images of fire lines, burned pines, and grainy shots of those mysterious orbs. My heart raced, but I tried to rationalize the experience as some kind of containment balloon experiment. As I radioed the tower for landing clearance, the strange encounter lingered in my mind. The late afternoon air was cool as I cut the engine and stepped out onto runway 21. A fuel truck idled near the hangar, and 2 mechanics waved, but I just gave a quick nod. My destination was the pilot's lounge to download my photos. That's when he appeared. Dark glasses, slim black tie, a black suit that seemed out of place on the dusty tarmac, no pilot's wings, no name tag. He approached with a measured stride, hands clasped behind his back. His demeanor suggested official business, maybe from the fire district. "Captain Lewis," he said, voice smooth. When he held out his hand, I shook it, noting his firm, dry grip. "Yeah, that's me, Richard Lewis. You with the fire department." He shook his head. Just a concerned observer. He knew about the orbs over Dry Creek. My stomach tightened as he spoke. "You saw them while circling the fire. Got some shots." A slow nod. "You've seen too much." He wanted me to file the sighting as a weather balloon release. Occasional county launches near Prospect for wind data. He pronounced prospect like a code word. A flicker of a smile crossed his face. Routine. No need to report anything unusual. He handed me a plain white card stamped with the airstrip logo and phone number. "Call this line tomorrow. Say balloon release confirmed. They'll know what you mean." I pocketed the card. He turned and walked away, moving as if choreographed, straight-backed like a music box figure. No goodbye. A black SUV waited by the hangar. The engine growled softly, and the vehicle dissolved into the parking lot's shade. Standing on the asphalt, I felt unsettled. Inside the lounge, I checked the photos. The orbs were there, soft, perched above the smoke, then vanishing in subsequent frames. I downloaded them to a flash drive, my hands shaking so much I spilled coffee. The next morning, I called the number, a generic recording. "Weather balloon release confirmed at 5:20 p.m. Thank you. Over and out." No name, no follow-up. The night stretched out long and quiet at Green's 24-hour mini-mart. My shift had been uneventful. Just 12 customers, mostly kids grabbing energy drinks and one guy picking up dog biscuits in the early morning hours. I'd sold 35 cigarettes and refilled the snack rack, my eyes constantly drifting to the strange black sedan parked under the lone street lamp. Something felt off. The car sat motionless, its polished body gleaming, headlights off, engine running so silently I could barely hear it over the air conditioner. Scout, the store cat, had retreated behind the chips aisle, her tail curled tightly around her paws. The hairs on my neck were standing on end. At 1:17 a.m., the soda cooler buzzed and flickered. A small power surge dimmed the fluorescent lights, but the coffee machine kept running. I convinced myself it was just the store's wiring and went to reset the breaker in the back room. The breaker for aisle 3 had tripped, and I flipped it back, watching the lights return. Then at 2:45 a.m., a cold, clear drip started from the ceiling near the back door, landing in a small puddle on the concrete floor. As I grabbed a mop and bucket, I couldn't shake the unease. I have a flash drive hidden in my console with photos that haunt me. 6 amber circles glowing in the darkness, perfectly still. I keep telling myself they're weather balloons, hoping I'll start to believe it. I haven't told anyone at the club about what I've seen. At 11:02 p.m., the door chime rang, but when I looked up, only empty double doors greeted me, with the dull hum of the neon open sign filling the silence. I checked the restrooms. They were dry. The drip from an air duct had slowed and stopped after 5 minutes. I'd emptied the bucket outside where the sedan was no longer parked. The lot stood empty. Scout rushed out from under the counter, rubbing against my leg. By 3:30, the store had grown quiet. The bug zapper over the door sizzled twice, and a chill cut through the space despite the AC being set on cool. I pulled my hoodie tighter and shivered. That's when I noticed something strange. The sedan rolled forward 3 feet with no driver visible. Its passenger door opened and closed on its own, as if guided by invisible tracks. I walked to the front doors, shining my flashlight at the vehicle. No movement. The engine was off and thick tires blocked any potential sound. Back at the counter, I stared at the security monitors. The cameras didn't cover the parking lot well, and the angle missed the driver's seat. When I hit the back lot view button and tried to pan the camera, the feed cut to static for 4 seconds before returning to normal. The black sedan remained frozen in pixelated grey. By 4:50, a young woman buying trail mix entered. She looked at me, then the lot, and asked, "Is something out there?" I replied, "No, just an old car." She nodded and left. At 5:30, I discovered my sandwich was missing from the break room refrigerator. The turkey and cheese I brought were gone without a trace. No note, no wrapper. I wondered if the night janitor had come early, but I hadn't heard anyone. My shift ended at 6 a.m. The sky was already turning grey. I rang up 2 more customers buying lottery tickets and beef jerky. At 6:02, I hit the door button. The chime sounded, and I grabbed my jacket. Walking out to the lot, I expected to see the sedan sitting there, but the parking lot was empty. I rounded the last bend before the radar station just as the sun slipped below the jagged horizon. It was near 8 o'clock on a late July evening, still warm, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin even after the engine's off. The radio was stuck between stations, static crackling in time with the whine of the tires on the asphalt. I was alone in my Toyota, windows down, a can of cheap iced tea sweating in the cup holder. I'd taken the gravel cut off because traffic on Highway 89 had been crawling all day, and I wanted to stretch my legs before the long haul home. The road ran past radar site Echo, those big white domes you see in pictures of secret bases, though it was mostly just abandoned admin buildings and a single guard shack. No one ever seemed to be around. As I slowed for a sharp corner, my headlights swept across the hillside and caught something. A flash of silver, thin and elongated, like a shard of metal skimming across the sky. It darted east to west faster than a jet. No roar, no contrail, just a silent streak. Earlier that day, the parking lot had been empty. No car, no footprints in the gravel, no oil spots. I checked the side door exit. It was locked, and no one had tried to pry it. My phone buzzed. A text from the manager saying, "Leave the key under the mat to maintenance at 10 o'clock. I hadn't told her the fridge thing, hadn't mentioned the car, nothing. I answered, "Got it." I walked to my car, keys in hand, and stopped. A black SUV sat idling in front of the convenience store across the road. A man in a black suit sat in the driver's seat, jacket buttoned, tie narrow, hands flat on the wheel. He stared at me without blinking. My pulse spiked. I raised a hand in greeting. He opened his door and stepped onto the street without a sound. I walked closer, keeping my jacket zipped. Under my breath, he said, "You won't remember this conversation." His voice was low but clear. He reached into his jacket pocket and pressed a small card into my palm. I saw the edges, white, blank, and in the corner, a single line of type, "Do not recall." I blinked. He stepped back, got into the SUV, and drove away without headlights, tires rolling silent on asphalt. I stood there, holding the card. When I looked down, the text was gone. My hand was empty. I glanced across the road. The store's doors were closed, lights still on inside. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove away without looking back. A quick streak of molten metal sliced through the twilight. My car skidded, fishtailing in the loose gravel as I slammed on the brakes. Standing outside, the heat enveloped me first, then an eerie silence. I placed my iced tea on the truck's roof and wiped sweat from my neck, scanning the darkening sky. A single star hung above the dome. My phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the hill. The trees stood motionless, the radar dome lifeless and round in my headlights. Just as I thought I'd imagined everything, a crunch of gravel broke the silence. Spinning around, I saw a black SUV blocking the road. It was massive, engine running, windows up, no lights on. I hadn't heard it arrive. The bushes must have hidden its approach. A man emerged from the passenger side. Tall and lean, with dark hair slicked back, he wore a crisp black suit and narrow tie. No badge, no name tag, no hat. His hands remained in his pockets, and he didn't use a flashlight. He simply stood, watching me with an unnervingly calm expression. I swallowed hard and pointed skyward. "Did you see something up there?" He tilted his head toward the hillside. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "This road doesn't go up. Keep driving." I frowned. "There's nothing past that dome except a dead end and a drop off to the river. What road goes somewhere?" Taking a step forward, he responded, "None that matters. Move along." My gaze drifted past him to the darkness beyond the dome. Thick woods, a steep slope, no trail. "I saw a silver object up there," I insisted, my voice tight. He shook his head, eyes locked on mine. Then, as if responding to someone beside me, he repeated, "Just drive." My chest tightened. I looked back at the hill. Nothing. No object, no glare, no movement. Just the white dome and tree line. When I turned back, he stood half in shadow, half in the SUV's faint glow. A hint of a smile almost formed, but never reached his eyes. "Am I in the wrong place?" I asked, my voice small and echoing on the empty road. He nodded slowly, deliberately, and slipped a folded card into my hand. "Why, 89 North. No detours." I looked down at the card, confusion mounting. My hands trembled on the wheel as I slid into the driver's seat, door left unlocked. The SUV was back, engine running, tail lights glowing dim red. A plain white flashlight with typed text caught my eye. "Keep moving, no stops. Watch the sky." I put the car in gear, and the SUV followed directly behind, close enough that I could see dark lenses staring ahead. Every glance in the rear view confirmed its presence. I wanted to pull out my phone, take a picture, anything to keep proof, but my hands shook too much to find the button. At the T intersection, I turned north onto the main road. About half a mile later, I hit smooth pavement and pressed the accelerator. Suddenly, the SUV vanished. No fading headlights, no mirror reflection, nothing. Just gone. I kept driving north until highway lights broke through pine shadows. The night air shifted, the radio crackled back to life, an old country song playing softly. At the next gas station, I pulled over, heart racing. I checked the back seat, empty. No card, no trace of my strange passenger. The passenger door was closed, seatbelt untouched. I filled the tank, bought a soda, and finally looked at my phone. No missed calls, just a low battery warning. No photos, no GPS record of the cutoff. The weather app showed clear skies, no moons visible until after midnight. The rest of the drive home was silent. I tried to piece together the fragments: silver dart, empty hillside, black SUV, the cryptic card saying, "Watch the sky." Every stray headlight beam against the treetops made me jerk the wheel. In the garage, I sat in darkness for a long minute. I cracked the card between my fingers. Smooth paper, cool ink. In the kitchen, I set it under the overhead light and made coffee. Through the window, the driveway split into shadow and yellow light. The sky over the ridge looked empty. Leaning my forehead against the glass, I listened intently for any sign. Engines, footsteps, anything suggesting he might return. Only the fridge's hum and a distant dog's bark broke the silence. I don't take that route anymore, not if I can help it. The GPS keeps rerouting me back to that cutoff, so I choose the longer road, bumping through extra miles of forest. My eyes dart to the sky occasionally, half expecting a silver flash, that fearful streak. When I close my eyes, I sometimes hear gravel shifting behind me, like a whisper from the darkness, telling me to keep driving. It happened while I was untangling my fishing line early one May morning. The water was calm, no wind, and I'd anchored the boat about a quarter mile from shore, hoping to catch some halibut. The sun hung low, making the sea look like glass. When I raised my polarized sunglasses and leaned over the side, I saw it, a perfect disk, maybe 2 feet across, hovering just below the surface. The disk gleamed like nickel, its edges blurred, as if seen through water. My fishing rod dipped and rattled with each small wave. Heart racing, I grabbed my camera and switched to dive mode, capturing a shot through the green-blue blur. The object remained motionless, no fish, no bubbles, no visible support. As I leaned closer, breathing through my ragged hoodie, it suddenly vanished. No ripples, no sound, just water. Back home, I downloaded the photo. On the screen, a pale, grainy circle appeared, barely an outline against the underwater scene of drifting seaweed and sun rays. I stared until my coffee went cold. That afternoon, I told my neighbor Jules, a marine biologist, about my strange encounter. She suggested it might be a sunken buoy or diving gear, less skeptical than I'd expected. We walked the jetty together at dusk, but the water was dark, reflecting only street lamp lights. No disk in sight. Over the next 2 days, I spent hours scanning the bay from my porch. My dreams filled with metal shapes drifting in deep water, and I'd wake at odd hours, convinced I heard something scraping the boat's hull. On the third morning, 2 men appeared at my door around 8:15. There I stood in my bathrobe, clutching a coffee mug, about to face whatever explanation they might offer. 2 men stood before me, both dressed in black. The taller one wore a fedora and suit with shiny shoes, while the shorter wore a baseball cap, jacket, and jeans. Their pale faces studied me intently. "Can I help you?" I asked. The tall man spoke, his voice low and polite. "Are you Kendricks?" I nodded. "That's me," he signaled to his companion, who handed him a plain manila folder. Inside were blurry prints, pale discs under dark water, identical to the photograph I'd taken. My own image looked smudged, as if someone had run a brush across it. "These are from your camera," he stated. I felt a surge of heat. Yes, that was mine. He closed the folder and delivered his message. The images should be considered equipment errors, glare, water droplets on the lens. We suggest you remove them and not speak of this further. My coffee mug shook in my hand as I set it on the porch railing. Why? His careful gaze met mine. No reason to make this public. Best kept in private records. You want me to delete the photos? A single nod confirmed it. Delete them? It will weigh less on your conscience. The stocky man leaned forward. Forget what you saw, he said softly but firmly. I surveyed them carefully, the tall man's fedora casting a perfect shadow over his eyes, the shorter man's cap hiding half his brow. Neither blinked. Silently, they returned the folder, turned, and walked to a matte black truck with no markings. The tall man tipped his hat, muttered, "Thank you," and climbed in. His companion followed. The engine hummed briefly, then died. The cab door slammed, and they disappeared down the road without headlights. Minutes passed. My heart pounded so loudly I feared it might wake the neighborhood. Eventually, I went inside, locked the door, and switched on every light. I found the disk photo on my laptop, dragged it to the trash, hesitated, then deleted it. Later that day, I returned to the jetty. Same spot, same light, same calm water. Nothing shimmered beneath, just seagrass, flat waters, and lazy cloud shadows. I lowered my camera, closed my eyes, breathed in the salt air, and tried to forget. The fishing forum. I keep replaying that night, how the men in black looked at me as if they were studying my memory. I haven't told anyone else. Not my wife, not anyone. Sometimes late at night I dream of that perfect circle hovering in the sea, and I wake up reaching for photos I already trashed. Now I sleep with windows shut tight and drive past the old jetty without slowing down. The bay looks normal, empty, like nothing ever happened. But I wonder, did I imagine it all, or is something waiting down there for me to look again? My last shift before the weekend started just after midnight at 5th and Madison. Rain had slicked the pavement, and steam curled off manhole covers. I'm Derek Chavez, a cab driver for East Side Taxis. A black sedan pulled in behind me, and 2 men in dark suits climbed into the back seat without a sound. They were silent, wearing white shirts, skinny black ties, and polished shoes. Even in the wet darkness, they wore sunglasses. One tall and lean, the other shorter and square-shouldered. No destination, no explanation. "Just drive," the tall one said calmly when I asked where we were going. I pulled away toward the freeway, watching the meter climb to $420. No expressions, no phones, just 2 dark shapes in suits. "Circle the city," the short one instructed when I suggested a route. He handed me a small paper slip, water-spotted and unreadable in the low light. I folded it into the console. The tall one tapped my seat, his jacket shifting to reveal a silver clip. No gun, just a metal rectangle. "Begin," he seemed to signal. Something was happening, but I had no idea what. Downtown lights shimmered ahead as I drifted through quiet neighborhoods and past neon signs and shuttered storefronts. The meter climbed steadily, $50, then $70. My head throbbed, and I checked my watch. 2:15 a.m., though I could have sworn it was only 12:30 moments ago. "Rough ride," I muttered. Neither of my passengers responded. The short one simply said, "Keep driving." I tried the radio, finding it. The city channel offered nothing but hiss. Cell service was spotty, so I cracked the window, listening for distant engines or sirens. Just a low hum and the occasional passing car. At 307, I turned onto a one-way street, crossing the river and entering the industrial district. Orange street lamps flickered weakly. Another arrow on the slip pointed back downtown, so I pressed the gas. The city skyline slid past, neon signs reflecting on wet asphalt. By 4 a.m., I was near the old freight yard. Rusty rails and dark warehouses surrounded me. I looped a block lined with chain-link fences, the meter now reading $142.50. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I wanted to ask about the payment, but the cab's air felt thick, pressing against my chest. At 4:22, I rounded a corner and saw a street lamp illuminating a crumpled paper taped to a stop sign. The shorter man leaned forward, pointing silently. I slowed and stopped. Under the lamp, the paper read, "Exit here." Following the instruction, I drove through an alley under a broken chain, past a shuttered auto shop, and emerged on the bridge. When the arrow pointed straight ahead, I stopped. The tall passenger opened the door himself and stepped onto the slick sidewalk without looking back. The short one followed, walking into a bright yellow bus shelter before merging into the night. For 30 seconds, I sat with my heart racing. Then I stepped out, closing the door gently. On the console, I found the paper slip now blank, with no ink or letters. The meter flashed fair courtesy of Agent S before resetting to 0. My head spun. I locked the doors and sat sipping lukewarm coffee, checking my phone to find 2 missed calls. From dispatch, one voicemail cuts through the silence. The message has been driving in circles for hours. Report in. I bite my lip and hit call back. An unknown number connects. No ring, just an abrupt click. A low, calm female voice emerges, saying nothing about last night's ride. My stutter breaks the silence. Who is this? Only quiet answers, then dead air. The rain starts again, drumming on the cab's roof. I sit for a long time before finally stepping out, locking the doors, and walking under the bridge to the bus stop. My headlamp from the glove box flickers to life. The yellow shelter stands empty, no suits, no footprints in the puddles. Home arrives at 5:03 a.m. The meter card in my pocket shows 0 charge. That unknown number vanishes from my phone's call log. I put on the kettle, staring at the rain-smeared window until dawn breaks. 2 hours later, I leave for my day job, carefully locking the front door and ensuring no one follows. I say nothing to dispatch. The ride's mystery remains unsolved. Who paid? Why the endless loops? The slip of paper in my pocket stays blank, yet I carry it everywhere. Sometimes, when light hits just right, faint arrow outlines seem to whisper. I quickly tuck it back into my wallet, walking faster, hoping that call never comes again. Sunrise reveals the first clue. Driving the crew truck down County Road 42, toward the Willow Creek site, my headlights catch something unusual. Dark, perfect circle about 2 feet across sits centered in the right lane. Unlike the surrounding normal asphalt, this spot looks baked, as if a blowtorch held steady until the surface bubbled. The pavement transformation is precise, a hard-edged charcoal patch without cracks. I park between the cones, hard hat and flashlight in hand, crossing the road. An odd smell hangs in the air, burning rubber mixed with ozone. Crouching, I shine the light. The circle is smooth, almost glassy, reflecting my beam. A gloved finger traces the sharp, unchipped edge. Tapping the center produces a hollow sound, like striking a lid. A shiver runs through me, wondering what could create such a mark. I clip the radio mic. Base to crew, something odd on County 42, mile 5.7. Silence answers. Everyone's already marking potholes on Route 99. A nearby rock becomes my probe, flicked toward the circle's edge, searching for answers that refuse to reveal themselves. The morning sun cast an orange glow behind cottonwoods as I checked my watch. 6:12 a.m. earlier, I discovered a strange black ring on the pavement, solid and unmarked despite my fist pounding. My phone's autofocus struggled to capture the grainy image. Dispatch told me crews were still mobilizing, so I drove south to the diner in Ibis. The two-lane road cut through empty farmland, corn stalks bending in a light breeze. Something felt off, like eyes watching from the fields. At the diner, Maria served me black coffee and a sausage biscuit. When I mentioned the mark, she shared her brother's story about a glowing blue shape in a crop circle near Tiller's Mill. Different details, but the same unsettling pattern, perfect geometry with no explanation. By 7:30, Ahmed and Lena arrived with shovels and metal detectors. We examined the site meticulously. Ahmed's detector remained silent. Lena scraped the edge, revealing only dust. We dug a foot down. Solid earth. No hidden devices. The circle stubbornly remained glued to the asphalt. We logged it as an unidentified pavement anomaly, marking the corners with alternating red and yellow spray paint. Around 8:45, I took a break, standing beneath a power pole and smoking. A helicopter swept the county line, passing north to south 3 times. No banner, just a systematic search pattern. I radioed base about the aircraft. No response. A county representative arrived mid-morning, sharp in a grey suit and sunglasses. He pulled up in a black sedan, engine off. When he showed his badge, C. Langford, Special Investigator, I explained the situation. Sam Gwynn, County Highway District 7. I introduced myself. He studied the circle, nodding. Interesting, he murmured, revealing nothing. Just another layer in this growing mystery. He pulled a booklet from his jacket and jotted down some notes. Radiation and heat anomalies. I told him the thermal camera showed nothing unusual, just a burned area with a strange smell and no tracks. He squatted, carefully running a gloved hand over the ground's surface without touching the center. Standing up, he snapped the notebook shut. "We'll keep this off the record," he said, looking me directly in the eye. "No reports, no photos, beyond initial documentation." When I questioned this, he tapped his sunglasses. "Just hold on to the pictures. If anyone asks, you never found anything, you patched it and moved on." I pushed back. "County policy requires logging safety hazards." His response was firm. "This isn't about policy. It's an order." He paused, adding cryptically, "You'll understand later." From his coat, he pulled out a card and slid it across the hood. "Here's my contact. If anyone asks about District 7 anomalies, tell them you referred it to me." The card showed only a phone number and name. C. Langford. No agency, no title, no logo. I watched him get into a black sedan and drive away without a backward glance. Crickets chirped in the grass. Lena and Ahmed watched from the cab, looking confused. I waved them over, instructing them to cover the hole with cold mix, smooth it out, no mention of the circle. Ahmed hesitated, but I insisted. Company policy. We covered the mark with black asphalt until it blended perfectly. I rolled over it twice, then packed up. During the drive home, the county card felt heavy in my pocket. Outside Ibis, the helicopter reappeared, its rotor blades slicing the grey sky into shadows. A chill ran down my spine. Home by noon, with rain dripping from my jacket, I tossed my keys on the table and shed my work boots. After a hot shower, I caught my reflection, tired, with dark circles and pale skin. At the kitchen table, I stared at the card. Langford, a special investigator so secret nobody seems to know him. My finger hovered over the phone number, hesitating. Black coffee in hand, cold sausage biscuit abandoned on the counter. The rain intensified, its rhythm matching my heartbeat. A car pulled into the drive. Miss Carter, soaked through, knocked. When I opened the door, she asked about the highway crew. I mentioned a routine patch. She told me her son had seen strange lights on the road at dawn, glowing cracks that vanished. I laughed nervously, calling them reflections. She smiled and left. The door closed. My pulse raced. I stared at the dark rectangle of cold mix in the driveway. My hand traced the repair sheet of metal. A manila card lay beside it. Rain drummed against the window, casting flickering neon shadows across the yard. I sipped the coffee until it went cold, watching the card. Langford remained uncalled. The photos stayed undeleted. I sat listening to the rain, feeling the pavement's watchful gaze. That summer, Cedar Hollow State Park was my workplace. Quiet and predictable hikers by day, wildlife by night. Dense with pine and oak, the park held its secrets. Near the north end, past the old fire road, I'd make routine checks. Nothing special, just standard patrol. One afternoon, about a week before July's end, I was slowly circling on my ATV when something caught my eye. A perfect circular clearing in the forest. This wasn't natural. 40 feet across, every tree inside was dead, brittle and grey, as if scorched, yet no burn marks on the ground. The grass yellowed and dry, seemingly lifeless. Surrounding trees remained healthy, untouched by disease or insects. I parked nearby and approached. The air felt heavy, almost sticky. Crouching, I poked the dead grass with a stick. It snapped easily, releasing a faint chemical odor. Something was definitely off about this place. The day had been long, and something felt off from the moment I found that strange patch of dead trees. I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong. When I tried to report it through my radio to the main office, the call went sideways. Midway through my explanation, the radio crackled weirdly and then went completely silent. I checked the equipment carefully. The battery and antenna looked perfectly normal, but no signal would come through. I considered the possibility that the dense trees might be interfering with the frequency and decided to head back to the ranger station to log my findings. By late afternoon, around 5 p.m., clouds were gathering and a few raindrops had started to fall. When I arrived at the station, everything was quiet. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and some low country music playing on the old radio. Later that evening, after dinner, I sat by the window overlooking the fire road. The rain had stopped, but heavy clouds still hung low in the darkened sky. Just after 9 p.m., headlights appeared, moving slowly down the road. 2 cars passed by, but one pulled off near the area with the dead trees. Through my binoculars, I watched 2 men step out of a dark sedan. They wore crisp black suits that remained perfectly pressed despite the wet weather. No rain gear, no equipment, just standing silently at the edge of the woods, facing the dead patch. Something about them felt wrong. They weren't like typical forestry workers. No badges, no radios, just an unsettling stillness. I wanted to approach them or call out, but my radio was still dead. After about 20 minutes, they returned to their car and drove away without ever looking toward the station. The next day, I revisited the patch, hoping for some change or missed detail, but everything remained exactly the same, a perfect circle of dead trees. No new tracks or signs of disturbance. I carefully examined the soil but found nothing definitive. No burns, no identifiable chemicals. When I mentioned the mysterious men to my supervisor, he simply brushed off my concerns, offering no explanation for what I'd seen. The following morning, the radio started working again, but I kept an eye out for the men in black just in case. They never returned. Still, every time I drove past that patch after dark, I felt watched, like something quiet and patient waited just beyond the tree line. Months have passed now. The dead trees remain, and the circle hasn't changed. I can't explain what I saw or why those men were there. It's as if the forest held a secret, and they were the only ones who knew. My name's Mia Jensen, a freelance aerospace journalist who'd been chasing missile launches for 2 years. I'd driven out the night before and camped in my car by the observation bunker, waiting for the scheduled test at White Sands Test Range. The sky was overcast with thick grey clouds low enough to tint the rising sun. Just before dawn at 6:02 a.m., the alert horn sounded. I raised my DSLR and framed the pad through the bunker's slit window. A bright flash erupted, and the missile's contrail cut through the clouds like a white ribbon. Jet noise filled the air, shifting from a deep roar to a distant whine as it climbed out of sight. I snapped a dozen shots, lowering the camera only when the sound faded. That's when I saw it. A lone figure backlit by floodlights near the service road, standing by the chain-link fence, shoulders squared at attention, head slightly tilted forward. No safety vest, no helmet, just a dark suit stark against the grey morning. I zoomed in with my lens. The figure remained motionless. I ducked under the window and headed out, camera in hand. By the time I reached the fence, the test crew had retreated to their vehicles and the road was empty. Just gravel and stray parachute hardware ribbons. The figure should have been there, but wasn't. I circled the perimeter, peered through glare tape, and checked every shadowy corner. Nothing. No footprints, no crushed grass, no trace of anyone standing there. My heart thumped. I tapped my radio. Range control, this is Jensen. Do you have an observer at the south fence? Silence. No answer. As I started walking back to the bunker, a soft click sounded behind me. I spun around. Under the flood lamp stood a man. Maybe it was some government forestry thing or a weather anomaly. I didn't push it, I stood by the fence, camera ready, thinking about the 10 minutes I'd spent searching for a figure I'd glimpsed earlier. The bunker's clock read 6:15. Someone had been here, a dark suit standing near the boundary. Then he appeared. Perfectly dressed. Black suit, white shirt, narrow black tie, shoes polished to a mirror shine. His posture was uncannily precise, as if tailored by an invisible hand. When he raised a small wave, I felt rooted to the ground. "Ma'am," he said, cutting off my half-formed question, "this area is off limits." I held up my press badge from Defense Tech Weekly. "I have permission for..." He shook his head. "Permission revoked. Please return to the bunker." His face was oddly neutral, not unfriendly, but completely expressionless. "Did you see someone here before?" I asked, my voice a mixture of ink. He cocked his head. "No." Checking his watch, he repeated, "Step away from the fence." I raised my camera, pressed record. "Can I get a quote about why I'm being escorted?" A faint smile flickered across his mouth. "No area is secured," he said, sighing as if this task pained him. "Are you going to comply?" The hair on my arms prickled. I lowered the camera and stepped back. He nodded, turned, and glided, not walked into the shadows behind the service road. By 7 a.m., the test crew had vanished. All their vans were gone. The bunker door was locked, empty. At the main gate, the security guard looked at me strangely when I arrived. "Range closure," he said. "You must have missed the memo." "There was no memo," I insisted. He just shrugged and punched in the gate code. "You shouldn't have been here." Back on the highway, I reviewed my photos. Missile blasts burned bright against the clouds, but along the fence line something else lingered. A dark blur, a shape like a standing figure, then gone in the next frame. Fabric-like edges, but no real detail. When I called my editor at 8:15, my voice cracked. She mentioned the hypersonic test site's tight security would scrub any sensitive images. But something had happened. Something I couldn't quite explain. I didn't expect anything unusual that night at the Green Ridge gas station, just another graveyard shift on Highway 89, where the fluorescent lights buzz and time crawls. Cars rarely stop here, mostly truckers and late shift workers passing through the quiet September darkness. Around 12:45, a beat-up silver sedan rolled up to pump 3. I was stacking energy drinks when the driver's window opened and the inside light clicked on. Moments later, the car door shut, but something felt off. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something strange near the tree line, a dark, round shape about the size of a small car, hovering a foot above the ground. Its edges were fuzzy, almost shimmering, completely silent, and without any lights. When I blinked and looked again, the car was still there, engine running, but the driver's seat was empty. I thought maybe the driver stepped out for a smoke. "Hey, you okay?" I called out. No response. Walking around to the passenger side, I peered inside. No one. The door was locked. Later, I'd find myself at a diner half a mile off base, spooning coffee with a camera bag beside me. A sealed manila envelope lay in my car's passenger seat. 2 cropped photo prints near a fence line and a single slip of paper. No return address, just a stamp dated 6/12. I folded the paper, tucked it away, and drove home. A highway stretched before me, yellow lines fading into dawn. I kept expecting to see a dark figure in my rear view. Perfect posture, black suit, unblinking eyes. But there was nothing, just the rising city lights ahead and a lingering sense of a half-remembered dream. I checked the rear-view mirror after circling the car and scanning the lot and trees. Everything was empty. The weird disc thing had vanished too. A hollow silence settled over me, making my skin crawl. I went back inside, locked the door, and tried the store phone to call the local sheriff. Dead silence. The radio was the same. Even though the place usually had spotty signal, I couldn't even send a text. When I turned around, the sedan was completely gone. No trace of headlights or taillights. About 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. A man stood there looking completely out of place. He wore a dark suit and tie on this warm September night, with perfectly slicked back hair and a pale, expressionless face that seemed lifted from an old black and white film. "Good evening," he said in a flat, calm voice. "I'm sorry to bother you. I just have a couple of questions." His demeanor was unnervingly collected as he asked about strange occurrences, lights, sounds, anything unusual. I hesitated, mentioning the car and the disc-like shape I'd seen near the trees. He listened without showing surprise, simply nodding and making a note in a small notebook. "Did you take any pictures?" he asked. I shook my head. He smiled thinly and advised me to keep quiet. "People misunderstand things they don't often see," he said, suggesting I shouldn't involve the sheriff. My gut screamed to call someone, but something held me back. Before leaving, he turned and said chillingly, "We're watching, but we don't want to cause alarm." I hit the trail at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, sun beating down on the high desert outside Cedar Flats. My name's Alex Morales, and I'd come out to clear my head. No cell signal, just the old missile silo they decommissioned in the 70s, sitting halfway up the slope of Bald Mountain. The trail was dusty and overgrown, but I'd printed a topo map the night before, so I figured I'd find it easy enough. By 4:30, I'd topped out at the crater's rim. The silo hulked there, half buried, concrete walls cracked and stained. I dropped my pack and walked around the perimeter, eyes wide for snakes. Instead, I saw patches of metal jutting from the rubble, steel panels, rusted bolts, sections of corrugated plating. I pulled out my camera to snap pictures of the peeling chrome finish. That's when I noticed the reflections. I looked at one panel and saw not my camera, but a flash of movement behind me. Something bright, almost white, sliding across the metal like liquid. I spun around. Nothing, just the sky. Heat waves dancing over scrub brush. I looked back at the panel. The glint was gone, replaced by dull rust. I crouched and shined my flashlight on the surface. Scratches, dents, but no new mark. My breath stuck in my throat. The angle of the metal couldn't catch the sun that way. I set the flashlight aside and circled the silo, peering into every recess. Between two wall segments was a narrow gap wide enough to squeeze into. Later, behind the counter at work, I couldn't shake the memory. A man in a suit had shown up, telling me to interfere unless necessary. Then he was gone. I sat there for the next hour, heart pounding, eyes flicking to the windows every few seconds. The night stayed quiet, too quiet. And the morning shift finally showed up. I handed over my keys without a word. I didn't want to say anything and have it sound crazy. For the next few days I kept checking the parking lot. No strange cars, no hovering discs. But sometimes, when it was dark, I'd catch a flash of something in the rearview mirror just at the edge of the lot near the trees. Always gone when I looked directly. I didn't tell anyone else. It felt like one of those things you just don't talk about, especially after a man in a suit tells you to keep quiet. The weird part is, I'm still not sure if I saw what I think I saw. Maybe the driver was playing a prank, but that didn't explain the empty car, or the shape in the mirror, or the silence that followed. Sometimes I wonder if they're still watching. I set up camp at the ridge's edge as the sun sank lower, casting a copper glow on the distant silo. My tent, sleeping bag, and stove were quickly in place, and I made ramen, staring back at the metal structure. Those strange blue reflections from earlier seemed to have vanished completely. Earlier, I'd crawled into the silo through a smooth, almost polished opening. Inside, old cables hung like dead vines, and murky water pooled at my feet. Momentary ice blue reflections had danced across the far wall, 10 or 15 pinpricks of light, as if someone had shaken flashlights behind the concrete ribs. But when I'd swept my light across the space, they disappeared. Midnight brought a low, strange hum, not like an engine, but more like air moving through a vent. I sat up, heart racing. Outside, only cricket sounds broke the desert silence. Crawling from my tent, I scanned the motionless sky. My headlamp revealed something curious. The silo's dome, where a vent cap once sat, briefly glowed a pale green before winking out. By sunrise, I was packed and hiking down toward Elkridge Ranger Station. 6 miles of walking left my legs aching, but I couldn't stop replaying those bizarre reflections in my mind. Dusty and dehydrated, I finally reached the station. Ranger Connolly, a woman in her 60s with sun-weathered skin, listened as I described my hike. When I asked if anyone else had reported strange lights near the silo, she tilted her head, assessing my tone. "Nothing," she said simply. Just then, the door chimed. A man in a crisp charcoal grey suit stood at the threshold. No ranger patches, no badge, just a pressed jacket and polished shoes, holding a white envelope. Ranger Connolly slid the envelope across the counter. Her eyebrow lifted. The red wax seal bore a single letter R. "Return to send her," Ranger Connolly said in a low, smooth voice. I believe this was misplaced. I stood there, my throat tight. "I didn't leave anything here," I said, my voice small and uncertain. The suited man didn't look at me or her. He simply watched the envelope, folded and waiting in her hand. "We don't have a mail drop here," she said. He responded. "Then, I'm the mailman." He straightened. "I trust you'll handle it accordingly." For the first time, he turned toward me. His face was calm, almost blank, dark eyes hidden behind thin-rimmed glasses. Then, without another sound, he walked out the door. Ranger Connolly stared after him, then tucked the envelope into her filing cabinet. "He's new," she said finally, as if the formality still lingered on her tongue. She waved at me. "Drive safe, Alex." I nodded and walked out, the envelope's empty weight echoing in my mind. Down the dirt road I felt watched by every shadow in the trees. The morning light brightened the sky, but something made me feel like noon would still be dusk. At my car, windows fogged with dust, I sat for a moment. Then I drove away, replaying memories. The bunker's seams, ice blue flashes, midnight's glow, and that suited man slipping an envelope through a locked door. I passed the bold mountain turnoff without a glance, headlights on low beam, waiting for something to light the horizon. It was a Sunday evening at the end of July, and I was parked at the overlook above Seal Cove near Mendocino. The air still carried the day's heat. I'd come up to catch the last of the light, maybe use my binoculars, nothing serious, just something I do sometimes. I love the ocean at dusk. Everything feels quieter. The lot was mostly empty, with just one camper van parked further down. No movement. I had my thermos of tea and small binoculars. Nothing high-tech. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. It started with a shimmer. Not flashing or moving, just a subtle distortion like heat rising off pavement, except it hovered out over the water, low, maybe a couple degrees above the horizon. The ocean was eerily still. A strange shimmer caught my eye, so faint I almost missed it in the haze. Not like any normal light from a fishing boat or the horizon. This was different. It pulsed with a steady rhythm, not flickering but moving in an odd way, folding into itself, then stretching out like a bubble made of something heavier than air. For minutes, it remained locked in place. No waves, no current underneath. That patch of water seemed disconnected from the ocean around it. Then something passed in front of it. Dark, without clear edges. Something big blocked my view, for just a second before vanishing. I scanned the water for boats or spotlights, but found nothing. My binoculars went strange right then. Not broken, just unfocused. I could see the railing, my hands, but whenever I tried to look at the shimmer, everything blurred. When I lowered the binoculars, the light was fainter, seeming to have drifted further out. I sat there as darkness fell, that heavy silence settling in. Just as I was putting away my binoculars, someone tapped on the window. A man, tall, pale, late 40s, wearing a crisp black suit and white shirt, no tie. He'd appeared from nowhere, no sound of a car or footsteps. He leaned in slightly and spoke with an unsettling smoothness. "That part of the sky isn't public," he said, his voice flat, like someone reciting words in an unfamiliar language. When I asked what he meant, his expression remained unchanged. I was down at Sunset Point, a gravel turnout just west of San Luis Obispo, that locals know but rarely appears on maps. It's my go-to spot after work, a quiet place to sit, have a drink, and clear my head. That night was warm, with a hazy sky that glowed softly after sunset, that strange light you get at the end of a hot day. I had my Nikons, binoculars my dad gave me years ago, always stashed in the glove box. I wasn't searching for anything specific, just finished my sandwich and leaned over the steering wheel, scanning the water. A tanker ship floated in the distance, a few gulls flying low. Then something caught my eye, a shimmer on the horizon, almost directly west, just a couple degrees above the water's surface. It looked like a heat mirage at first, completely still. Suddenly, a man appeared next to my car. He didn't repeat anything, just firmly said, "Please don't use optical devices in restricted airspace." My hands shook slightly on the wheel as I tried to keep my tone casual. I looked past him, expecting to see a vehicle, but the lot was empty. The camper van from earlier had vanished without a trace. I glanced back. He was walking away, not following the beach path, but heading toward the bluff's edge. No flashlight, no hesitation. He just kept walking until he disappeared from view. I waited, though I'm not sure why. Part of me expected him to return or say something more, but the path remained silent. Eventually, I drove home in complete silence. Back in my apartment, I pulled out the binoculars and tested them. They were perfect, crystal clear. I pointed them at street signs down the block, and everything came into sharp focus. The next day, I returned to the same spot at the same time. The ocean looked identical, same breeze, nothing in the sky. I stayed for about an hour. No shimmer, no man, no van. But something was different. A new small metal sign bolted to the wooden rail that I was certain hadn't been there the night before. It read, Sensitive marine surveillance area. Do not loiter. The ocean wasn't its usual self, and the air had changed. A strange shimmer hung there, almost cube-shaped, with an edge that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Through my binoculars, I held steady, but the shape defied clarity. My eyes wanted to slide away from it, and the edges bent subtly as I watched. No sound, no lights. Just this bizarre distortion in the air. The water beneath looked darker, somehow different. I wiped my binoculars lenses, looked again, and it was still there. I stared long enough to see the light change, the sun dropping completely below the horizon. Yet the shimmer maintained a weird internal glow, not bright, but just visible enough to confirm its presence. My phone was in my hand, ready to capture the moment, but something stopped me. An inexplicable feeling suggested that taking a photo would alter something fundamental about what I was witnessing. Headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. At first it seemed routine. People often pulled into this lot, but this black sedan approached with purpose, stopping just 5 feet behind my bumper. No interior lights, no visible occupants through the windshield. The engine idled quietly, then simultaneously both front doors opened. 2 men in black suits emerged, crisp white shirts, narrow black ties, perfectly neat hair, and faces devoid of expression. They approached my window with mechanical precision. The driver's side man tapped my window. I rolled it down halfway. No greeting, no introduction. That part of the sky isn't public, he stated flatly, his voice detached but not robotic. When I asked what he meant, he offered no explanation. His partner stood nearby, scanning the road as if expecting something. The first man produced a thin manila folder, holding it just long enough for me to glimpse the bold black label. The night was quiet along Highway 24 in eastern Utah, a long stretch of road cutting through open desert and red rock. Early April, windy but clear. I was working night patrol, parked at a gravel pull-off near mile marker 219, watching for speeders. Though honestly, they were rare past midnight. Just after 2 a.m., I glanced at the clock, thinking about grabbing a sandwich from the cooler. That's when I saw it. Something strange hovering near the northern ridge. Not flying like a plane or moving like a drone, just hanging there. A perfect black cube, maybe the size of a small car. No lights, no reflection. It didn't wobble or rotate, just sat suspended about 40 or 50 feet above the ridgeline. At first, I thought it might be a perspective trick, maybe a tower or boulder catching unusual light. But there was no moon, and the stars behind it had vanished. The cube blocked them completely. I stepped out of the cruiser and stood by the door. The wind was sharp, with only occasional gusts breaking the silence. I stared, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My first instinct was to call it in, but something made me hesitate. Days later, I found myself in a strange encounter. Someone handed me a document with text about restricted natural phenomena. Without opening it, he tucked it back under his arm. When I asked what it meant, he simply said, "We'd like you to leave now." I nodded silently and started the ignition. The man stepped back, and I pulled out of the lot slowly. At home, I wrote down everything I'd seen and sketched a quick drawing of the shimmer. I searched for explanations, military zones, weather balloons, optical illusions, but nothing matched. The next evening, I returned to the spot, parking further down and sitting with binoculars in my lap. The sky looked normal, the ocean calm. A brand new sign was bolted to the railing where I'd been parked before. Plain metal with black print. Unauthorized. Observation prohibited. No photography or optical equipment beyond this point. 2 days later, when I checked again, the sign had vanished. I was patrolling the ridgeline when something unusual caught my eye. A dark, cube-shaped object hung motionless in the air. Suddenly, it glided smoothly to the left, moving at a steady pace of about 5 or 6 miles per hour, maintaining the same altitude. No lights, no sound, just this dark box sliding along the landscape. After covering around 100 yards, it stopped abruptly, seeming to observe something. I picked up the radio and reported an unidentified aerial object near mile marker 219, possibly a drone. Dispatch offered to contact air support, but I told them to hold off. The object wasn't technically breaking any laws, just existing. Returning to my car, I kept watch through the windshield. For about 5 more minutes, nothing changed. Then, without warning, it began ascending slowly, climbing higher and higher, until it vanished completely. No blinking lights, no trail, just gone. That's when the headlights appeared behind me. I hadn't heard an engine or seen anything in my mirrors. One moment the road was empty, the next, a black sedan idle just 10 feet from my cruiser. No tags, no markings, windows completely blacked out. I stepped out and approached, hand near my sidearm but not drawn, flashlight already on. When I shined it at the windshield, the light reflected cleanly off the glass. I couldn't see inside. Two men emerged identical in black suits, white shirts, and black ties. Something about them seemed off. Their posture was unnaturally straight and synchronized. The tall one, around 6'2", walked up to me. No badge, no ID. He simply held out a manila folder with a red, natural PHE stamp. The folder looked freshly printed. Without a word, he handed it to me and stepped back. Inside was a single sheet with numbered instructions. Observe time between 1 and 3 a.m. Do not engage or pursue. No documentation required, no photographs, and absolutely no discussion with media or outside agencies. A blank line at the bottom waited for an initial confirmation. The shorter man offered a pen. I didn't sign. I was running the Northwestern Rail Line route through the Cascades. Mostly quiet stretches of forest and mountains with a few small towns along the way. My job was routine, checking tickets, announcing stops, keeping everything on schedule. But one night in late October, just after 9 p.m., something happened near Elkridge station that I can't explain. The sky was mostly clear and a bit chilly. Two men approached me after I'd noticed a strange cube outside. They didn't identify themselves. The tall one looked at me and said in an unsettling, perfectly memorized tone, "The object is not your concern." His delivery was strange, like someone who had learned English from a textbook but never spoken it naturally. When I asked for identification, he barely smiled. Not a genuine expression, but something that seemed like an awkward imitation of human emotion. The shorter man stared past me toward the ridge and repeated, "You didn't see where it went." I responded that I didn't follow, and he repeated the same phrase. They returned to a dark sedan that moved without engine noise or headlights. It rolled backward, made a precise three-point turn, and glided down the highway as if it knew the road better than I did. Back in my cruiser, I checked the dash cam. Nothing. The playback showed a clean sky where the cube had been. No outline or distortion. The sedan didn't appear on camera at all. I spent an hour deciding whether to report the full story. Eventually, I logged it as an unidentified aerial object with no interaction or pursuit. That was 6 weeks ago. I haven't seen the cube again, but twice since then, I've spotted the same sedan parked near my shift change point. Same model, same dark glass, never moving, always gone when I return. They act like I signed some form, but I didn't. The train rolled steadily through a remote forest section where dense trees blocked any view beyond their thick trunks. Moonlight cast long, pale shadows across the tracks, and I sat in the conductor's cabin sipping lukewarm coffee from my thermos. I'd made this route countless times before, always without incident. That night felt different. As we rounded a slight bend near milepost 42, a soft, ghostly beam of light began sweeping across the trees on the right side of the track. It wasn't like any light I'd seen before. No headlights, no flashlight. This beam moved with an eerie precision, cutting through the darkness in a smooth, steady arc that didn't reflect off the trees like normal light would. I leaned closer to the windows, straining to see the source. The train's steady clatter was the only sound, with no hint of machinery or voices. The light continued its methodical scanning motion, and through the trees I caught a glimpse of a shadowy shape near the clearing's edge. It seemed too tall to be human. I blinked, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks, but the light remained constant. When I tried to radio the dispatcher, only static answered. The light beam eventually disappeared behind a ridge, but an unsettling feeling lingered, as if something was watching the train's progress. 20 minutes later, we pulled into Elkridge station. The platform was empty, typical for this late hour. But then two men suddenly appeared at the far end, standing completely still. They wore identical black suits and ties, impeccably pressed despite the damp chill. No coats, no hats, just two figures that seemed completely out of place. The train was unusually quiet that night at Elkridge. Two men caught my eye immediately. They weren't typical travelers. No backpacks, no luggage, and strangely they didn't seem affected by the cold. Their movements were deliberate as they walked to the last car and boarded without tickets or interaction with anyone. Something felt off. The train was supposed to be closed for boarding, and the radio dispatcher remained silent. I checked my watch. We had about 40 minutes until the next scheduled stop. As the train started moving, I observed them sitting side by side near the back of the car. Other passengers seemed to deliberately ignore their presence, as if the men were invisible. They sat motionless, staring straight ahead. No blinking, no movement. When we reached Grove, I grabbed my ticket puncher and walked to the rear car, but when I arrived, they had vanished completely. No trace on the platform or in the station. I asked other passengers about them, but nobody recalled seeing anyone new. Most just shrugged. A strange feeling settled in my chest, like I'd missed something crucial. I reported the incident to the station master, who gave me an enigmatic look and quickly changed the subject. In the following days, I investigated. Other conductors reported nothing similar. Dispatch offered no explanation. Even maintenance crews at Elkridge confirmed no night work had occurred in weeks. The more I thought about it, the more puzzling their appearance became. The unexpected arrival at a remote station, the radio silence, the strange light sweeping the forest, nothing made sense. During a daytime visit to Elkridge Station, everything looked normal. No signs of disturbance, no hidden cameras, no unusual equipment. Official logs showed no record of unauthorized boarding that night. Weeks later, I found myself unconsciously scanning the sky near Elkridge during my passes. No light beams, no mysterious men, just a lingering sense that something unexplained had occurred. Night fell early at the campsite near Lawson in Northern California. It was late September, chilly enough to see your breath, but before the first real snow. I'd taken time off work, skipping my usual coastal trip for some solitude. The Forest Service site was tucked away on a dirt road, just a small clearing big enough for my car and a two-person tent. I arrived around 4 in the afternoon while daylight still lingered. Setting up camp was quick, a small fire, a camp stove with instant rice and beans for dinner. Absolute silence surrounded me. No other vehicles, no distant voices or music. Cell service vanished the moment I turned off the highway. By 9 p.m., darkness had completely taken over. No moon, no ambient light. I spent some time by the fire before retreating to my tent with a mystery novel. My phone showed 9:42 p.m. in airplane mode. After reading a few chapters, I turned everything off, probably falling asleep close to 11. Something jolted me awake around 2:08 a.m. The tent was completely illuminated, as if a massive white floodlight had been switched on directly overhead. Unlike a car's headlights or a flashlight, this was different. Eerily, there was no accompanying sound, an absence that unnerved me more than the light itself. Cautiously, I unzipped the tent and peered out. The light source was above me, not on the ground. What I saw made my breath catch. 5 or 6 small white lights rotating in a perfect, tight circle about 40 or 50 feet above the treetops. They were evenly spaced, moving in sync, but no connecting structure was visible. I crouched at the tent's opening, watching. My knees went numb from the cold as the lights continued their methodical rotation. Then, abruptly, they stopped. For 2 seconds, they hovered motionless before vanishing instantly. Not fading, just gone. Darkness returned immediately, complete and absolute. In my work as a conductor, I've seen strange things. But sometimes, alone in the cabin at night, I can almost feel unseen eyes watching from the woods while the radio remains silent. Driving back down the forest road at sunrise, I'd packed up quickly, not even bothering with coffee. The tent was tossed into the car, and I kept checking the rearview mirror during the entire trip, though nothing was behind me. About 40 minutes later, I pulled into a small roadside diner called Mineral. I'd passed it before but never stopped. 2 booths, a counter with stools, and an old linoleum floor greeted me. Only one other person was inside when I entered, a man sitting at the counter with his back turned. The waitress waved me in and told me to sit anywhere. I chose a booth by the window and ordered eggs and toast. When she disappeared into the kitchen, the man at the counter stood and turned around. He was tall, pale, wearing a sharp black suit that seemed out of place. No jacket, just perfectly pressed black pants and a button-up shirt tucked in with straight sleeves. An old-fashioned, wide-brimmed hat sat on his head, dark gray or black. Without a word, he walked over and slid into my booth. I stared, waiting for him to speak. His hands were folded on the table, as if this meeting had been planned. Then he asked, calm and strange, "Did you sleep through it?" I said, "Excuse me." He repeated the question, slower this time. Something tightened in my chest. I claimed I didn't understand. He tilted his head, then gazed out the window, seemingly disinterested. The waitress returned with my food. "Everything all right here?" she asked. I'd been chasing storms for about 8 seasons now, mostly solo, tracking wild weather across western Kansas. This particular day was about 15 miles outside Scott City in late May. It was one of those perfect storm setups that make chasers' hearts race dry line pushing east, shear conditions ideal, and cape values climbing through the roof. The sky started flat and blue, but by late afternoon it transformed into something alive and menacing. I was parked on a dirt road with a wide horizon view, watching a cell build for about an hour. Around 5:40 p.m., the storm really came together. A classic supercell with a big inflow tail and tightening rotation. I positioned myself east of the wall cloud, roughly 2.5 miles out. Lightning was constant, but no rain had fallen yet, so visibility remained clear. My main camera was set up on a tripod at the back of the truck, with a GoPro running a time-lapse on the dash. At 6:12, the funnel dropped, thin as a rope at first, but quickly widening. It touched down in an open field, immediately kicking up dirt. I kept recording, repositioning once to stay ahead of it, capturing a full 3 minutes of the tornado at its peak strength. During those 3 minutes, something happened that I still can't explain. The tornado was wrapping in rain, but I could still make out its base. Suddenly, there was a flash, bright, but definitely not lightning, coming from inside the tornado. Later, at a roadside diner, something strange occurred. A man sat near me, silent and intense. He didn't order coffee or food. When he suddenly stood and walked out without a word, I asked the waitress if she knew him. She hadn't even seen him come in. I ate quickly, barely tasting my meal. Outside, his vehicle was gone. Just my car and a rusty pickup truck remained. During the drive home, I tried to rationalize what I'd seen, thinking maybe I'd dozed off or imagined the whole thing. But when I got home and checked my phone, I found something unsettling. In the Notes app was a new entry, a string of numbers typed at 2:17 a.m. when I was supposedly asleep in my sleeping bag. No title, no formatting, just a line of numbers broken into sets of 3, like coordinates. I haven't looked them up, and honestly, I don't want to know where they point. I was tracking a tornado when something caught my eye in the storm footage. A metallic object, disc-shaped, moved against the wind's rotation for just a split second. It seemed to fold into the cloud and vanish almost instantly. Back at my hotel room in Oakley, a basic concrete block place off US 83 with rusted HVAC units and a lobby that smells like freezer burn. I reviewed the video. The clip was strange, frame by frame. The object looked solid and smooth, slightly tilted, visible for only 4 frames, maybe a quarter of a second. No noise, no pressure changes, no electrical disruptions, just this thing. When I tried transferring the GoPro footage to my laptop, something odd happened. The file existed, but wouldn't open. A supported format, the error said. I tried rebooting different software, nothing worked. The main camera footage was fine. I isolated and slowed down the clip, enhanced the contrast. The object had mass. You could see the wind bending around it. In hundreds of tornado videos, I'd never seen anything behave like this. I uploaded the clip to an external drive and unplugged everything for the night, deciding not to post anything online yet. Around 1 a.m., a soft knock came at my door. 2 gentle taps, patient, not urgent. I looked through the peephole. 2 men in black suits, late 30s or 40s, stood completely still. No luggage, no phones. One was taller, wearing a plain fedora-like hat. Both had pale skin. I didn't open the door. After about 20 seconds, the tall one spoke through the door, his voice low and controlled. I was hiking alone near the southern edge of the Bitterroot Range early October before the snow came in heavy. My name is Nate Shepard. I'm 38, live in Missoula, and I like to get out in the woods a few times a year to clear my head. The place I went isn't on a marked trail. It's one of those old Forest Service access roads that got decommissioned years ago, now mostly used by hunters and the occasional backwoods camper. I'd found it the year before while helping a friend scout elk routes. There was a path just faint enough to follow if you knew what you were looking for. That weekend was supposed to be a short overnight solo. Hike in, set up camp, maybe catch some stars if the sky held clear. No cell service, no sounds except wind and birds. That kind of quiet always settles me. I've still got the rest of the tornado footage. Regular people see a tornado tear through a field, tear apart a fence, throw a grain bin, but I remember that half-second flash, that shape inside something it had no business being inside, and I remember those 2 men at my door asking for it like I'd stolen it from them. Are you prepared to surrender the storm data? Not your data or your footage. The storm data like it didn't belong to me. I didn't respond, just stood there, heart thudding in my ears. The shorter one shifted his weight slightly like he was about to speak, but didn't. Then they both turned and walked away. I watched them through the peephole until they were out of view, then flipped off the lights and sat on the bed for a while, trying to process it. I looked outside 10 minutes later. No sign of them. Parking lot was empty, except for a pickup 2 doors down. No black car, no footprints on the walkway. Next morning, I checked my laptop. The file I'd exported was gone. Not deleted, just not there anymore. The folder I'd saved it in was empty. And when I searched for the file name, nothing came up. The drive hadn't been wiped, just that one clip missing. The external hard drive wouldn't mount. It spun up, then made a soft click and went silent, dead. I had backups at home on a desktop, but I didn't feel right until I got out of town. I skipped the next chase day and drove straight back to Lincoln. Weeks later, I tried again to pull the file from the memory card, and it was there. Just glitched all green frames and scrambled audio. Whatever had been clear before was now unreadable. The sky was overcast but thin enough to see ridge lines against the clouds. I parked by mile marker 87 and started up the slope around 2 p.m., about a mile and a half in. An unusual metal sign caught my eye. Grey and dull, it was bolted crookedly into a pine tree, reading restricted zone in block letters. No agency logo, no contact number. This was strange. I'd hiked this trail before and never noticed a boundary marker. The sign looked old, with rust eating into its edges and the bottom right corner bent as if someone had tried to tear it off. I paused, considering my situation. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Just hiking, no fire, no hunting. The sign seemed barely attached, with no fence or tape around it. Likely an old fire closure or logging claim, I thought, and continued on. A couple miles further, I set up camp near a small bluff overlooking a dry creek bed. The sun had dropped behind the mountains, and temperatures plummeted quickly. I started a small fire, brewed some tea, and sat on a log with my headlamp off, watching the trees sway. That's when I saw the light. Hovering about 30 or 40 feet up in the forest, maybe 100 yards out. At first I thought it was a drone, but its movement was odd. It would pulse, dimming to nothing, then flaring up a few feet away, almost blinking in and out of existence. The color was a soft, organic red, shifting like it was seen through water, completely silent. I stood up slowly, not wanting to draw attention, and extinguished the fire with dirt. The light pulsed twice more, then vanished. I remained still, staring into the darkness, but it didn't return. Sleep was difficult that night. Come morning, I packed up early and headed back down the trail. Everything looked normal, but something felt different. The woods seemed hollow, as if the wind had stopped carrying sound, like the forest itself had stopped listening. I can't explain it better than that. Half a mile from my parking spot, just before the trail widened, 2 men stood near the tree line. Their presence was immediately strange. Black suits, no outdoor gear, no coats or hats. Their shoes were unnaturally pristine for this hiking trail. One was shorter with grey hair and a sunken face, the other taller and younger, but both shared the same blank, unreadable expression. They weren't talking or moving, just standing side by side as if waiting. When I slowed down and gave a quick nod, I assumed they might be from Fish and Game or some local land agency. But they didn't introduce themselves or ask about my presence. The shorter man looked directly at me and said calmly, "This part of the forest doesn't exist." I laughed, thinking I'd misheard, but he repeated it with the same flat tone. "This part of the forest doesn't exist." Unsure if I was being threatened or tested, I tried to explain. I didn't see any. I'm just hiking and heading back to my car. They remained motionless. The taller one finally spoke 3 chilling words. "You weren't here." Without another word, I walked around them, avoiding eye contact and quickening my pace. They didn't follow. When I reached the road, my truck was exactly where I'd left it, but the back tailgate was unlatched, something I never do. Nothing was missing, just different. My cooler was upside down, and my sleeping bag hung halfway out of the truck. I quickly packed everything, locked the doors, and drove straight back to Missoula without stopping. Later that night, I checked my GPS hiking app. The track stopped abruptly midway through the hike. No elevation data, no timestamps, just a straight line ending in the middle of the woods. The next morning, the entire track had vanished. I haven't returned to that trail since. My flight was a routine job, leaving Gallup, New Mexico in late afternoon, early June. It was supposed to be a short 90-minute hop to Chinle, Arizona, just to deliver some documents for my boss. I worked part-time ferrying materials between regional offices for a land survey company, flying our 1981 Piper Archer. I keep the old bird in a hangar at Gallup Municipal. It might be aging, but it flies just fine. That day, the weather was typical for the Four Corners region. Hot, a little hazy, with light winds and barely any air traffic. Out here, you can go miles without seeing another aircraft. I was flying solo, no passengers or cargo except a sealed envelope tucked in the back. Just me, a thermos of coffee, and a radio that kept cutting out with static. About 40 minutes into the flight, right after passing Shiprock, something strange caught my eye out the starboard window. At first, I thought it was a bird or a sun glare, but when I got a good look, I knew it wasn't a plane, not like anything I'd ever seen before. A matte black triangle, no visible engines or markings, gliding silently about 200 feet higher and a quarter mile off my wing. It held position perfectly, as if tethered to my aircraft. I checked my transponder and squawk. Everything normal. I called out on seat. Nothing. Tried again. Dead air. The object hung there for maybe 30 seconds. No cockpit or windows visible. Then it drifted closer, not threateningly, but enough to make me sweat through my shirt. I turned 10D south slowly, trying not to provoke whatever it was. It mirrored my movement exactly. No noise, no jet wash, just an eerily perfect silent glide. Suddenly, it climbed straight up, vanishing in 2 seconds. No contrail, no pressure shift, nothing. I scanned everywhere, but saw nothing. 20 seconds later, the radio crackled back to life with a standard weather update from Albuquerque Center. I responded, filed my position, and continued the route as if nothing had happened. Landing at Chinley's dirt strip, I was still shaken. The dry, hot air smelled of creosote as I stretched and tried to forget the encounter. I handed the envelope to the guy at the small shed they call an office and went to taxi back. That's when I saw him. A tall, lean man in a black suit, white shirt, no tie, holding a clipboard, no vehicle around. I figured he was waiting for someone else. But when I shut down the engine and opened the canopy, he walked straight toward me like he knew me. "Mister," he said. "That's my name," I replied. He stood there with those narrow sunglasses, watching me without extending any greeting. No handshake, no small talk. Just a direct statement that cut through the silence. Your route was misfiled. This airspace doesn't exist. His words hung in the air, stark and uncompromising. I apologize, but it seems like the original text you intended to share is missing or incomplete. Could you please provide the full text that you would like me to rewrite? Without the original script, I cannot complete the task.